Chapter 1526, Destroying the Rain Clan 2. I'm not even close, Su Ping shook his head. Stunned, Joanna asked, not even close. Above the ancestral gods are the chaos ancestors. I'm only stronger than ordinary ancestral gods at the moment. Chaos ancestors can crush me with one word, said Su Ping. He wasn't exaggerating. The horror of a sorcerer ancestor wouldn't be understood until you saw them. One of them had built a dragon prison with thousands of universes. Even the entire world of gods merely represented a single floor inside that prison. They can crush you with one word. Joanna was completely shocked. She felt that her head was exploding. It was already a level that she couldn't understand using all her imagination. The ever-changing view paused again after traveling for a moment. And this. Joanna came back to her senses. I'm just going to finish off an annoying guy, said Su Ping. He raised a hand and slapped a continent. The gigantic hand manifested in the air, struck the ground brutally, and broke the protective array covering a territory. That technique was called natural manifestation in the age of deities. Who's there? Was a furious roar that followed, and a figure rushed over. It was none other than the Rain ancestor. All the formerly calm people of the Rain clan raised their heads in shock. They were frightened since the protective array had been broken. Fear transitioned to excitement when they saw the figure in the sky. For the past hundreds of years, that human being had been the most unforgettable existence for them. The news of Su Ping becoming the human ancestor was disseminated all over the world. After all, the birth of an ancestral god would be a shocking event for any clan. And Su Ping finally showed up. It's you, the Rain ancestor became gloomy, with cold light flashing in his eyes. You recklessly attacked my clan and violated the rules. Nobody can save you today. That's right. Nobody can save you today, not even the 7 great clans, said Su Ping indifferently. He then raised a hand and moved to smash down violently. Shocked and infuriated, the Rain ancestor said, the 7 great clans will punish you for starting an ancestral god war. Actually, I just punished them just now, said Su Ping. The hand pressed down ruthlessly. The Rain ancestor detonated his universe and made stabbing moves with his spear, but all of it was easily destroyed by the great Tao under the palm. The terrifying power made the Rain ancestor realize that something wasn't right. It was too late for him to escape, though. His body was shattered by the palm, along with his universe. The old expert's universe was regenerated, but it was being entangled and suffocated by the aura of chaos. This is impossible. How can you be so strong? Roared the Rain ancestor. Answer. Su Ping wasn't interested in further talk. He annihilated the guy's soul and absorbed his broken universe. Everything was done in the blink of an eye. The sky became clear again when he finished, but the fragrance of blood lingered in the air. From today on, you won't be a high-ranked clan anymore. The Rain ancestor is already dead. You may live and die on your own. Su Ping showed no mercy to the Rain clan. He didn't destroy the 7 great clans because they would be needed in the war against the heavens. But the Rain clan, it only had one ancestral god. Su Ping wasn't interested in them at all. Besides, their grudge ran too deep. Too many humans had been killed by the Rain clan in order to rescue him. They needed justice. Panic and shock overtook the Rain clan people after Su Ping's declaration. Lin Tianjin, the Rain emperor, and the others shivered. They hoped that the Rain ancestor would show up and deny those claims. However, they could somehow sense that their ancestor had truly been killed. Could an ancestral god kill another ancestral god? Has Su Ping already reached the level of the old monsters in the 7 great clans? They didn't know. They could only grumble as they watched him leave. The Rain ancestor didn't return after a long time passed. Fury turned into fright. Their enemies wouldn't let this opportunity go if something had really happened to the Rain ancestor. Su Ping summoned the Inferno Dragon and said to Joanna, I'm going to meet some old friends. I'll leave the little dragon to accompany you. Tell him if you want to go anywhere. She was completely lost for words upon seeing that the Inferno Dragon had evolved into an ancestral god too. She could only nod in response. After saying goodbye to her, Su Ping went to the Chaos Perception Dragon's residence. The great dragon stood up as soon as he arrived. It stared at Su Ping with anxiety in its crimson eyes. The beast was keenly able to sense the aura of chaos coming off of Su Ping. Unlike before, he had completely evolved and turned into a true member of the primitive Chaos clan. The Chaos Perception Dragon stared at Su Ping and said, "You've got even stronger." Su Ping smiled. "Isn't it only natural? Do you even hear what you're saying?" The Chaos Perception Dragon didn't know what to say. Even after becoming an ancestral god, the guy was still improving at a fast pace. The great dragon even suspected that Su Ping was the reincarnation of a chaos ancestor. If that wasn't the case, he should have hit the bottleneck after becoming a peak ancestral god, even with the training of a chaos ancestor. "Are you here to pick him up?" The Chaos Perception Dragon figured out why Su Ping was there. Su Ping nodded and looked ahead, then saw a spot of light darting towards him. Once closer, the round and fat figure turned out to be the young Chaos Beast. It looked no different from its past image, except it was slightly bigger. However, Su Ping could feel the terrifying power inside its body. It had also evolved and turned into an ancestral god. "It seems that you do deserve to be its master," sighed the Chaos Perception Dragon. It had never fought against Su Ping, but being a mythical creature allowed it to feel Su Ping's strength. A blood-deep fear was felt even by him just standing there. "I was lucky to meet the fellow," Su Ping smiled. "Daddy." The young Chaos Beast's body shrank as it moved to hug Su Ping's leg. It had always regarded Su Ping as family, ever since he helped its egg hatch. Su Ping helplessly petted the little one and said, "I'm not your daddy, call me brother." "No, your daddy." The young Chaos Beast was persistent. "You make me sound too old if you call me daddy," Su Ping complained. Chaos Perception Dragon. "Thank you very much for all you've done," Su Ping said to the Chaos Perception Dragon. "I'll ask the gods to stop hunting you." After some surprise, the great dragon shook his head and said, "That won't be necessary. I'm fine being with ferocious beasts. I don't like those gods anyway, and I want to eat them when I see them. This desolate land for you is actually a home for me. I like the soil and scenery." Well, Su Ping didn't pursue the matter. "Fine then. Given your strength, you only need to be careful about the 7 great clans in the future," said the Chaos Perception Dragon. "They've already been taken care of," said Su Ping. "I'll be in charge in the world of gods from now on." The giant dragon looked at Su Ping in shock. After a long silence, it said, "Then, it shouldn't be a problem if I eat a few ancestral gods now, right?" Su Ping was amused by the question. "Better hold that thought, unless they act and offend you. We're bound to fight the heavens in the future. I hope to unite all the power of the gods and meet with the mythical creatures to fight the heavens. All the available forces should enter the battlefield." "The heavens?" The Chaos Perception Dragon's eyes glittered. It nodded and said, "I'll be there." They exchanged glances. Su Ping couldn't help but smile and pat the beast's shoulder. He sighed like talking to an old friend. "I hope we can have real peace." "Peace is not a good thing, because it has to be defended by bloody wars," said the Chaos Perception Dragon. Su Ping found it ironic too, but that was reality. Even the most beautiful flowers grew from filthy mud. Everything could be dependent on its opposite. Chapter 15:27, Sorcerer Ancestor T. Luo 1. Su Ping said goodbye and left after chatting with the Chaos Perception Dragon for a while. His instincts told him that everything would be different next time they met again. Ever since his advance to the ancestral god realm, his instincts weren't simple illusions. This came as a slight surprise, but he knew that gut feeling was related to fate. He could only let nature take its course. Su Ping took the young Chaos Beast away with him. He led both his customers' pets and his own to the desolate lands in the world of gods. He searched for Dao heart and ancestral god beasts while training them, so he could loot their great Daos. Concurrently, the Tao power he had obtained from suppressing the 7 great clans and killing the Rain ancestor allowed him to condense 6 universes in a row. Yet again, he was much stronger than before. Even with such attainments, he didn't slack off. When compared to the sorcerer ancestors, he would probably have to condense all the 3,000 core great Taos that made up everything in the universe and turn them into his universes so he could resist them. Su Ping traveled in the world of gods for half a year, killing 3 ancestral god beasts and condensing 3 universes during that time. Given the extreme pressure, the dark dragon hound also became an ancestral god too, evolving into a silver chaos dragon wolf. Its body was like a mountain and its claws were like pillars. It had a truly ferocious look. However, the great Tao it had consolidated was focused on defense, and its damage dealing was only reasonably good. It was able to remove the power in everything. Only the extremely offensive great Taos could hurt it a little bit. Even Su Ping would have to use the power of his chaos universe and 3 other universes in order to kill it. It was easy to tell that it was truly good at keeping itself alive. You'd be one of the best in terms of survival means, even among the 12 sorcerer ancestors. He couldn't figure out how the dark dragon hound had managed to attain such a powerful great Tao, which was on par with those of the sorcerer ancestors. Was the fellow inspired by the great Tao that he taught it? Unfortunately, even though the great Tao was powerful, it had reached its limit. Su Ping had also imparted his multiple universes to them in order to improve their potential. However, it was truly difficult for them to condense more universes like he did. They didn't have the time and the corresponding cultivation resources. Once he summoned the Inferno Dragon, Su Ping found that Joanna was obviously much gloomier than when they parted last time. It seemed that she was bothered by something. "What's wrong?" asked Su Ping. "Did someone bully you?" He didn't think it was likely, though. After all, the Inferno Dragon had been protecting her. The former was an ancestral god already. "Nope." Joanna slightly shook her head and then stared at Su Ping, as if there was something she wanted to say. But eventually, she only replied with, "If we're gone one day, would you remember us?" Stunned, Su Ping replied without thinking, "Of course I would, but why would you be gone?" She looked relieved by his answer. She then put on a charming smile on her beautiful face and said, "I will always remember you too." "Are you running a fever?" Su Ping touched her forehead. Joanna knocked Su Ping's hand away angrily. "Don't you want to go back? Hurry up." What a puzzling woman. Su Ping asked the Inferno Dragon, "Where did you take her?" "We just wandered around. Let's just head back," Joanna replied for the Inferno Dragon. She urged Su Ping angrily as if she found the guy annoying. Lost for words, he could only communicate with the system and return to the store. After a long time away, Su Ping telepathically communicated with Elaine up above and asked the estimated time of arrival to the ancestral god's land. Once he got word that there was still a long time to go, he simply went to other cultivation sites for training. Time flew. Su Ping traveled to many high-rank cultivation sites. The ones of middle rank were no longer challenging for him. Even the strongest forces in most middle-rank cultivation sites only had Tao Heart State experts. Some of the top mid-rank sites had ancestral gods, but they were the minority. He condensed more undying universes as he looted more great Taos from the high-ranked sites. There was no more suppression from his chaos universe. It couldn't stop him from condensing more universes anymore. As for the purple python and his other pets, they became stronger and stronger through many battles. The vast sky thunderous dragon became his 3rd ancestral god pet. The great Tao it attained was called Eternal Tribulation, which was even more destructive than the heavenly tribulation itself. After testing, Su Ping found that it was another great Tao on par with the sorcerer ancestors' bloodlines. The result was surprising to Su Ping. He asked them to replay the process of how they consolidated their great Taos, only to find that they had fused their experiences in all the cultivation sites, and the knowledge that came from the multiple small worlds that Su Ping had condensed and imparted to them. Those great Taos accommodated their short yet glorious lives and contained their experiences and understandings. Without them realizing it, the dark dragon hound and the other pets, which had always been by Su Ping's sight, had almost always entered the cultivation sites every time he went there. They were already the best among their peers, and they had been trained countless times. Although the effects of training would decline with repetition, their potential had been improved to the maximum. Chapter 15:28, Sorcerer Ancestor T. Luo 2. Every living creature had limited potential. That potential would be the deciding factor for the upper limit. It was like a bloodline. However, potential could be improved. As a trainer, Su Ping successfully did just that. An excellent teacher could teach so well that a kid who failed an exam would get a full score in the following test. However, when it came to geniuses, getting a full score was just the beginning. It was normal for them to skip grades. That was the difference in upper limit between geniuses and ordinary people. There was a huge gap in intelligence. Even the most distinguished teacher was unable to improve the upper limit of an ordinary person to that of a genius, unless they were gods. By activating and changing their bloodlines, Su Ping had fundamentally improved the dark dragon hound and his other pets to the mythical creature level. He reshaped their bloodlines with the aura of chaos, making them veritable mythical creatures that gathered the essence of power in the world. Time flew. Su Ping returned from cultivation sites every once in a while, then asked Elaine for updates. To his delight, the journey was rather smooth, and they hadn't encountered the heavens on the way. One day, Su Ping made calculations and returned from a cultivation site. He then went to see Elaine and said, "We're almost there, right?" "Yes, according to the time system in your place, we'll arrive in 1 week," she replied. Su Ping nodded. The time was too short for him to enter another cultivation site. After all, he would probably not be able to react in time in case of a conflict upon arrival. "Can you tell me which sorcerer ancestor we're going to meet?" asked Su Ping. He only hoped it wouldn't be the original dragon's leader. After all, he had just had a conflict with the latter, and he would rather not meet him again without the system's protection. "It's fine to tell you now. It's sorcerer ancestor T. Luo." Elaine released her great Tao power and weakened her voice countless times. He wouldn't have heard her if not for his ancestral god cultivation. She only did so because she didn't want to be disrespectful. It was all to prevent sorcerer ancestor T. Luo from sensing that his name had been uttered. T. Luo, Su Ping thought to himself and felt relieved. It was fine as long as they didn't meet the original dragons. "I can make introductions when we get there, but it's best not to talk about it here," said Elaine. Su Ping nodded. 1 week passed fairly quickly. Su Ping stopped going to cultivation sites. Instead, he stayed in the store and ran the business with Joanna and the others. It had been a long time since he devoted himself to working in the store. He once again experienced the joy when he just obtained the system. Unfortunately, many of his customers from back then were already gone. For example, the lovely girl named Su Yanying, who was the lightning rat's first master. With his current power, he could resurrect her by calculating the girl's past with causes and consequences and copying her memories. In other words, the recreated person would be identical, with the same memories and personality. However, they wouldn't be the same person. That was the reason why he never tried doing that. It seemed like a disrespectful thing to do. The lightning rat was also aware of that, so it didn't try doing it either. It had only been waiting for its real master from the past. It would rather not create a toy to play with. Huh. Su Ping sensed something. He vanished from the store and reappeared high in the sky. "We've arrived," Elaine said to Su Ping with excitement. It was as if she had finally seen land after helplessly drifting on the ocean for a long time. She was hopeful again. Elaine disappeared. She turned into a wisp of smoke and seeped out of the Tao crystal. Su Ping also flashed out of the green glass world. He then saw a vast and brilliant continent in the silent darkness further ahead. There were infinite lights and shadows flashing on the continent, like an ancient and primitive world. He could see gargantuan beasts the size of planets. So big, Su Ping narrowed his eyes and said, "It wouldn't be detected by the heavens, right?" "No, we've come here through special coordinates," said Elaine. "Also, I received the calling of the ancestor 3 days ago. It sensed our presence and realized that we weren't related to the heavens. That's why it allowed us to approach. Otherwise, we would have never reached this place." "That's good," Su Ping nodded. Very soon, the two Tao crystals continued their onward movement, one after the other. They approached the vast continent. A boiling aura suddenly appeared in the vicinity. It turned out to be an enormous ancient beast with countless tentacles. The end of each appendage had an oval pink thing that looked like a suction disc. It sent out an ancient voice. "Which race are you? Why are you here?" That was Su Ping's translation of the guy's transmitted thought. Before Elaine replied, 4 ancestral gods of the cyborg clan flew out of the Tao crystal in the rear. Among them was exactly one of the leaders that Su Ping had seen in the past. He said with a mixture of excitement and respect, "We're the cyborgs that derive from the silicon creatures. Our universe was attacked by the heavens, and we're hopping to seek refuge here." He simply told the truth. He had obviously learned from their historical records that no tricks would work on the 12 sorcerer ancestors. "There's also the aura of other races here." The Ti Luo clan's ancestral god rolled its dozens of eyes and gazed at Su Ping. It was actually more concerned about that inconspicuous figure than about the cyborgs. "We're human beings. We were also attacked by the heavens, and we're here to seek protection and to establish an alliance," said Su Ping. "Alliance?" Elaine and the others were shocked by the word. They hurriedly looked at Su Ping. The host ancestor shivered, as if amused by what Su Ping said. However, after its tentacles floated for a while, it said, "You carry the smell of the primitive Chaos Clan. You're lying." "I'm not lying. I simply received the power of the primitive Chaos Clan, but I used to be a human," said Su Ping calmly. The tentacled ancestor gazed at him for a while, then said, "Whether you're from humankind or the primitive Chaos Clan, we welcome you. Besides, the primitive Chaos Clan ancestor made great contributions to the resistance against the heavens. Come on in." After saying that, it slowly dissipated in ripples. The cyborg ancestral gods felt relieved, but they looked at Su Ping in astonishment. They had complete historical records and knew how terrifying the primitive Chaos Clan was. It had one of the 12 sorcerer ancestors in the Age of Chaos. Su Ping glanced at the cyborg experts. They had obviously lied about the number of top experts they had, making him think that they only had 3 ancestral gods. However, given his current power, it made no difference even if they had 30 of them. Led by Ti Luo clan's ancestral god, everybody followed and flew into the ripples. They finally arrived on the continent, which seemed to be right in front of their eyes but was actually countless spaces and timelines away. Chapter 1529, The Most Difficult Thing in the World 1. This is where you'll live. Everybody looked at the mountains and rivers down below while hovering in the high sky above the continent. The Ti Luo clan's ancestral god who had been leading the way summoned an energy-made depiction of the whole continent. The map directly appeared inside the heads of all those present. However, it was resisted by the brains of ancestral gods such as Su Ping, and wasn't displayed inside their minds until they gave their permission. In short, it was like knocking on the door. As for those with lesser cultivations, the map was simply stuffed into their heads. There were zones marked with different colors. A small projection of the tentacled ancestor appeared on the map and pointed at a certain zone, which would be their temporary residence. "That's the boundary. It's insurmountable." The host ancestor pointed at the central area of the map, where a curve separated it from the periphery. "That's the most important place for our people. It's the place where the sorcerer ancestor rests. Remember this well." Sorcerer ancestor. The cyborg ancestral gods shivered. The better they knew about history, the more terrifying sorcerer ancestors were in their eyes. Those were existences who had the power to destroy hundreds of undying state experts with the blink of an eye. Su Ping's eyes glittered. He noticed that there were a lot of independent zones beyond the curve marked on the map, which were similar to the zone allocated to them. He asked, "Do all races who join you stay at the periphery?" The Ti Luo clan's ancestral god looked at Su Ping and said, "Yes, but not all of them. You're qualified to stay there because you're in the undying state. Races without any undying state experts would be settled in the void at the edge of the continent." Su Ping nodded. That was the iron rule, the strong preying on the weak. There was nothing unfair about it. If the weak were treated equally, wouldn't it be unfair to the strong? It seems that a lot of powerful races have come here. Su Ping glanced at the independent zones and counted 1,382 of them. This meant that there were at least 1,382 undying state beings. That's right. Ancestral gods were supreme in the Archean divinity, but there were 1,000 of them in that continent. It was nothing surprising, though. After all, there were at least 200 undying state experts in the world of gods. Each of the 7 great clans had a couple of them. The rest of the clans had 200 ancestral gods in total. If all those experts joined forces, they could easily overthrow the 7 great clans. However, uniting forces was the most difficult thing in the world. If the common folk united, they could overthrow the crown. If all the ants united, they could knock over stones thousands of times heavier than themselves. The 7 great clans weren't tyrants. They never forced the other clans to resist them at the risk of being eliminated. After all, those clans weren't made by mortals who never remembered. They knew that they would still have a new ruler in the end, even if they won. The space atop the pyramid was limited. Allies who once fought together would fight each other over the fruits of victory. "Are those zones already occupied? What if new races come to join you?" asked Su Ping. The host ancestor said, "It's easy. You've just arrived, so we've specifically established a place for you to settle between the 2 zones." Su Ping nodded. It wasn't very difficult for an ancestral god to construct a new zone. There are 1,382 powerful races here. The cyborg ancestral gods were shocked, never expecting that they would only be some among the thousands of refugees. They suddenly felt insignificant. Was that the appeal of an ancestor? Don't go around unless you have to. Don't start conflicts with other races. If you do cause any trouble, deal with it by yourselves. Some of the races don't have good tempers, said the Ti Luo ancestor. Su Ping raised his eyebrows. We're here to establish an alliance and deal with the heavenly Tao together. Why would we stir conflicts? Humph! The tentacled ancestor merely snorted in response. Su Ping frowned, then looked at the map and the frown deepened. Soon after, their host led Su Ping and the others to their assigned zone, which was an extremely vast land. When checking the map, it was just one of the 1,000 tiny pieces at the edge of the continent, but it was actually the size of a solar system, several light years away from the nearest zone. There were turbulent rivers and vortices in between. Only those above the celestial state could cross them. Just stay here, call us if you need anything. You cyborgs should be more aware of what our sorcerer ancestor is capable of. We know everything, so don't try to play any tricks, said the host ancestor. The cyborg ancestral gods quickly nodded. Su Ping remained silent. Once their host left, he finally said to Elaine, "Is their clan good at perception?" Scared, Elaine looked around and then smiled bitterly. "That's right. So you must be careful about anything you say, Ancestor Su. Our conversation is probably being heard by them. They might even know our own thoughts." Su Ping raised his eyebrows. He knew that it wasn't their host ancestor, the one able to sense their thoughts, but the sorcerer ancestor that had yet to reveal himself. Chapter 1530, the most difficult thing in the world too. Only those existences could easily detect their thoughts. We're here hoping to strike an alliance with them. Their attitude doesn't seem right, said Su Ping. He was only being polite. So far it felt like the treatment used when dealing with prisoners. Elaine's face was green. Su Ping was truly bold to freely speak his mind while being on the territory of the Ti Chuo clan. Her only concern was that the cyborgs could be implicated. With a bitter smile, she said, "Ancestor Su, we should be grateful that they're willing to take us in. Don't overthink." She then winked at him. Su Ping understood what she meant, so he dropped the subject. He remembered how arrogant the original dragons were back then. The Ti Chuo clan was indeed not bad in comparison. He heaved a sigh in his heart and set about transferring the humans stationed in the green glass planet. The cyborg ancestral gods approached Su Ping. Their leader said, "Ancestor Su, the available space is limited. We might live here for 100,000 years or even longer. The human population is limited. How do you think we should divide the territory?" "We'll split it," replied Su Ping before the other could finish. Then he thought for a moment and said, "However, to thank you for leading the way, I'll give you 20% more." "Ancestor Su, all the human population is but a tenth of ours," said another cyborg ancestral god with a gloomy face. It was obvious that they wanted to divide it according to the current proportions, 9:1. That was reasonable for them. After all, they had guided Su Ping to that place. Su Ping narrowed his eyes and looked at them. "We've traveled together for a long time. Do you really want to fight over territory? We don't know anything about companionship. We only know that resources should be allotted in the most reasonable way," said another cyborg expert, emitting pressuring waves. He was cold and impolite to Su Ping. Su Ping gazed at him and said, "Then, what's the reasonable distribution according to you?" "The law of the universe dictates that the strong take all. Ancestor Su, I hope that you won't make things difficult for us," said another cyborg ancestral god. Su Ping took a deep breath, once he saw that they had already cornered him with words. He wanted to laugh, but he couldn't. The deep breath he took eventually became a heavy sigh. Even his travel companions were fighting him over territory. No wonder ancestral god Ti Chuo said that there would be conflicts. Shouldn't their enemy be the heavens? Su Ping only felt bored after such a response. He simply said, "If you're talking about the law of the universe, let's just split it up. As thanks for leading the way, I'll give half of the territory." "What are you talking?" The cyborg ancestral gods were stunned and turned cold. However, before anyone could take action, a wind was already sweeping about, destroying the great Tao. None of the ancestral gods were able to see any rays of light. Their world was consumed by darkness. Once they regained their senses, they discovered that the wind had stopped blowing. Behind them was a bottomless ravine that ran to the edge of that zone. "This will be the border." Only Su Ping's voice was heard in the end. He had turned around and left. The cyborg ancestral gods narrowed their eyes and looked at the figure who was moving away. They then looked at the terrifying ravine. They could have done a similar destructive feat. However, the lingering aura in the ravine terrified them. The pure and abundant Tao power was enough to wipe them out. "He's not a human being. He's a true member of the primitive Chaos clan," said one of the cyborg experts with a shaky voice. "We shouldn't have suspected the senses of that Ti Chuo expert." Another cyborg had a contorted expression, awfully regretful. Having the bloodline from the primitive Chaos clan, Su Ping could grow and become a top undying state existence, one that only those who carried the heritage of the 12 sorcerer ancestors could defeat. "We misjudged him." The cyborg leader was also somber. He didn't expect such terrifying power to be hidden under Su Ping's human guise. Elaine was stunned. She looked at Su Ping's back as he left. For some reason, she didn't feel any fury or killing intent exuding from that back, only loneliness. After setting the border, Su Ping summoned his master and the others living in the 9 states. He informed them of the situation and asked them to settle down. It would be another temporary settlement after a long trip. However, nobody knew how long they would stay there. After everyone was properly settled, Su Ping flew to the high sky and called out, "Ti Chuo." There was a swooshing sound. Ripples gathered before his eyes as ancestral god Ti Chuo appeared. He gazed at Su Ping and asked, Descendant of the primitive Chaos clan, what do you want? Su Ping gazed at him and said, I want to know how long we'll have to wait here. Is the sorcerer ancestor waiting for other sorcerer ancestors, or for enough races to gather? What's the plan and strategy to cope with the heavens? You're asking too many questions, said the ancestor host unhappily. You don't need to know the sorcerer ancestor's arrangements. You'll be informed when it's time for you to know. Fighting the heavens is an important matter. All you need is to follow orders. There's no need to think about anything else. As he stared at the ladder, Su Ping said, So, we can only wait indefinitely in this place. If you don't want to wait, you may choose to leave, said the tentacled ancestor coldly. The sorcerer ancestor was merciful enough to give you a place to stay. You should be grateful. Su Ping nodded and said, Indeed, we are grateful for being given a place to live. It is a great favor. I only want to know how we're going to deal with the heavens. I hope that we can make the best use of our power. If there are any plans, we can prepare in advance. As I said, you only need to follow orders. Don't think too much, said ancestral god Ti-Chu impatiently. Su Ping looked at him but didn't say anything else. He turned around and returned to the human zone. Led by Shen Huang, Kai Wying, and the others, the desolate continent was divided into different territories. Buildings and cities were built. It was easy for them to construct anything. Once the cities were finished, the ascendant cultivators came out from the universes of experts Shen Huang and the others. They in turn released the Star Lords and the residents in their small worlds and assigned them to different cities. The new cities became lively soon after. It only took a few days to transform the desolate land into prosperous settlements. Su Ping didn't travel to other places. He returned to his store and continued training in cultivation sites with the dark dragon hound and his other pets. Already mentalized for an indefinite waiting time, Su Ping planned to seize the time and improve himself to the maximum while he also waited for the system to wake up. Time moved on. Su Ping traveled on the cultivation sites. He traversed many high-ranked sites and saw all kinds of species, which had assorted battle skills. Even though their skills were fundamentally based on the Great Tao, he could still learn a lot from them. The chaotic realm of the undead. It is said that all the living creatures are bound to reincarnate there after they die. Su Ping had checked every corner of the chaotic realm of the undead and killed dozens of ancestral gods. However, there was no sign of the little skeleton in that place. He had tried searching the place earlier on. He wasn't an ancestral god back then, and there were dangerous places he couldn't enter. At the moment, he had almost turned the whole place upside down. The system has never lied to me. Never. So there's gotta be another way. Su Ping was standing atop a mountainous beast's body. He looked into the distance for a moment, then chose to return to the store with his pets. He quickly noticed that his store had changed greatly the moment he got back. Chapter 1531, Mother of Chaos 1. The shape of the store had turned from a cube into a sphere. Joanna was still in one of the rooms. She seemed to be asleep. Green Lady, Tang Ruyan, and the others were cultivating in another room. Is that? The lobby in the store became extremely vast. All the items were gone. There wasn't even a counter. There was only emptiness. There was a hazy, glowing figure in the emptiness. It was a beautiful girl with her back against him. Su Ping looked at her in a daze. He had an extremely familiar feeling from the girl's back, but he found it hard to believe. You're back. The girl turned around and looked at Su Ping calmly. Her eyes were like lakes reflecting the brilliance of all stars. Her face was the image of unparalleled beauty and tranquility. She was breathtaking. She gazed at Su Ping. This familiar voice. Su Ping's head was ringing. He was dumbfounded. The voice belonged to the system. This girl was the system. The aura was so familiar that Su Ping thought he was dreaming. However, he was already an ancestral god and would easily know if he were hallucinating. Everything was real. Was that the real appearance of the system? You. Su Ping took a deep breath, then said with a heavy and bitter tone, Why are you a girl? The girl was silent for a long time before she said softly, "Can't you be serious?" "I'm very serious," Su Ping said. "This is a very serious question. Please erase everything you've read from my head." The girl asked back, "Aren't you curious why I look like this?" "Why?" asked Su Ping. "Because this is my original appearance," replied the girl. Su Ping took another deep breath and said, "This answer is truly surprising." The girl said softly, "I know you have a lot of questions and I will answer them for you. Now is the time for you to know." "How can I resurrect little skeleton?" asked Su Ping immediately while staring at her. The girl pursed her lips, as if expecting he would ask this first. She said, "You search for the little skeleton soul in the chaotic realm of the undead. Not being able to find it was the only natural outcome, because you didn't go to the real chaotic realm of the undead." "I didn't go to the real chaotic realm of the undead." Su Ping felt dazed. The real chaotic realm of the undead was already destroyed. The souls of the living creatures in this world will float for a while and then disappear without a chance to reincarnate, unless they possess other bodies, explained the girl. "Then—" "Don't worry," said the girl. "There's a sorcerer ancestor who can easily resurrect anyone except for another sorcerer ancestor." Su Ping asked immediately, "Who?" "Sorcerer ancestor Shi Mang," said the girl. "If you find him, he will help you resurrect the little skeleton." Su Ping silently made note of the name. He then asked, would he be willing? He was afraid that the guy would be as short-tempered as the original dragon's ancestor. If that were the case, it would be useless even if he begged. After all, he wasn't qualified to negotiate or trade with a sorcerer ancestor. "He would," the girl put on a smile and said. "He's always been obedient." "Obedient?" Dazed, Su Ping stared at her and said, "Who are you exactly? Can you talk now?" "Don't you already know?" "The system? Stop joking. No species can develop such an AI unless you tell me that there are other worlds beyond this Empyrean space that's already beyond all other universes. But that would be impossible. This is the end of everything," said Su Ping. Once he became an ancestral god, it became increasingly clear to him that the system was not simple. The girl chuckled and said, "It's time to tell you everything. This is indeed where the original point of everything is, and I was the first creature born from the original point. You may call me Mother of Chaos." "Mother of Chaos?" Su Ping was stunned. The girl revealed a piece of shocking information. "All 12 sorcerer ancestors are my children." Su Ping was shocked. He looked at her in disbelief, but he soon remembered all the powers that the system possessed and everything clicked. No wonder the system could go to all worlds, including the Golden Crow's ancestors' hideout without being noticed. So she was the Golden Crow ancestor's mother. "Then who's your husband?" asked Su Ping. The girl was slightly surprised by the question. She was the all-powerful Mother of Chaos, and she had spent a long time with Su Ping, yet she couldn't really keep up with his train of thought. "You wouldn't think it's the heavenly Tao, right?" The girl looked at Su Ping suspiciously. "Is it not?" Su Ping was slightly surprised. He had truly made that wild guess just then. After all, the heavenly Tao had slapped the 12 sorcerer ancestors in the face. It wasn't hard to believe that it was the 12 sorcerer ancestors' father. The girl shook her head and replied, "I didn't create the world of chaos until after I gave birth to the 12 sorcerer ancestors. Nobody kept track of time until they were born. I had already fallen asleep by then, so nobody knew about my existence. Even the cyborgs merely kept records of some of the sorcerer ancestors' deeds." Su Ping listened carefully and said, "What's the heavenly Tao then? If you gave birth to the 12 sorcerer ancestors, you must be stronger than them, right? Can't you deal with the heavenly Tao?" Chapter 1532, Mother of Chaos 2. The girl shook her head and said, "After I gave birth to the 12 sorcerer ancestors, it took countless years for them to give birth to their own bloodlines, finally making the age of chaos lively. As for the heavenly Tao, it was the sum of the non-living creatures born in the most prosperous and glorious moment in the age of chaos." Non-living creatures. Su Ping narrowed his eyes. The heavenly Tao was something born by the combination of all living creatures, thoughts and emotions, along with the power of the chaos universe. They're objects that transcend the concept of life. They have all the characteristics of living creatures, but they're not alive. So they're indestructible. The girl continued. They would respawn even if they were erased. They healed and mutated at a very fast pace. They absorbed most of the power in the world of chaos in a very short amount of time and reached a shocking level. That was the first time for Su Ping to learn about the origin of the heavenly Tao. He couldn't help but feel surprised and puzzled. Is there a way to finish off the heavenly Tao? If they can't be destroyed, aren't they invincible? The girl slightly shook her head and said, they're not invincible. If they're destroyed 1,000,000,000 times and the power of chaos in their bodies is scattered, they will return to their most primitive form. By then, they can easily be erased, imprisoned, and sealed. There are countless ways to finish them off. So, the real problem is how to destroy them 1,000,000,000 times, right? Su Ping found the matter tricky the moment he heard the number. So, you can't take care of the problem either, right? That is correct. The girl stared at Su Ping and said, when I woke up, the heavenly Tao had nearly destroyed the entire world of chaos. My power was deeply connected to the world, so I was heavily wounded too, and I couldn't compete with the heavenly Tao. So you chose to raise an heir? Asked Su Ping. Your 2 previous hosts were the candidates you picked, right? The girl nodded. Yes, you are the 3rd. Su Ping heaved a sigh and said, I'm not dead yet. It seems that we're both very lucky. I hope we can finish everything once and for all this time. A thoughtful light flashed in the girl's eyes. We don't have a lot of time, nor chances for this. Me neither. Su Ping sighed softly. He was both shocked and relieved after learning the system's real identity. He once asked the system if it could finish off the heavenly Tao. The answer he received was no, and the girl was still saying no. It made sense. If she could, she would have done so long before. You're slightly different from the time you acted like the system, said Su Ping. I'm not talking about the appearance. The girl nodded and said, I had previously sealed part of my power and I recovered while I was sleeping. I would only wake up until you upgraded the store to level 9. This is the bed of chaos where I slept. Can money really be converted into the so-called energy points? Su Ping looked at her in surprise. Of course not. The girl said, the store was only meant to train you in different phases. After following the instructions all the way to the last upgrade, that would mean that you would have grown up, and it would be the time for me to wake up and lead you to deal with the lingering crisis that has existed since the age of chaos. Su Ping realized that the store was just a greenhouse where he was nurtured. It didn't matter whether he could make money or not. What mattered was that he had to get stronger. So to speak, the store is just a shell where you slept and waited for me to grow, and the system was just a subconscious thought you set up before you fell asleep, Su Ping speculated. More or less, the girl said. Earlier you said that the chaotic realm of the undead I saw wasn't real. What did you mean by that? Su Ping asked. The girl gazed at Su Ping and said, it's time for you to know everything. None of the cultivation sites you saw were real. Su Ping trembled and slightly changed his expression. What do you mean? They were all fake, illusions, impossible. He didn't believe that the people he saw in those cultivation sites, with their furious, earnest or sorrowful eyes, were fake. Su Ping stared at her and said solemnly, even if you're the mother of chaos, I believe that everything I've been through is real. It couldn't be an illusion made by you. The girl gazed at Su Ping and replied, your experiences were indeed real, but those cultivation sites are not. Or rather, they were real, but they're already gone now. Gone? Su Ping was stunned. The girl heaved a soft sigh. Back in the age of chaos, some of the 12 sorcerer ancestors had already died when I woke up, and my power was robbed from me. I couldn't fight the heavenly Tao, I could only retreat. After that, the world of chaos collapsed into billions of universes. Different lives were born in those universes. They were the cultivation sites you visited. Some sorcerer ancestors established universes of their own. Others reigned over some universes. Some of my children's corpses were transformed into universes. The girl stared at Su Ping and added, "The world of gods and the world of deities followed the ancient age. The age of the Archean divinity came after the age of chaos, when the cyborgs and many other species coexisted. Once the Archean divinity was destroyed by the heavenly Tao, deities were born. There were also millions of universes in the age of deities, and different species survived after the age of gods ended, but they were eventually destroyed in the Third War." Su Ping listened to her in a daze, feeling that everything inside his head was turned upside down. However, he learned many things he was unaware of. "So the cultivation sites that I've visited aren't in the same timeline." Su Ping was stunned. He had more or less noticed it, but for some reason he neglected the fact. "That's right," said the girl. "They are the survivors of the Great Wars. If you go to the Golden Crow's world and ask them about the Archean divinity, they wouldn't know a thing because the Archean divinity didn't exist in their era. The Archean divinity originated from the ancestor of the primitive Chaos clan, whose body turned into three pieces. One was the Archean divinity, the second part was the chaotic realm of the undead, and the last was hidden. The Archean divinity and the chaotic realm of the undead existed in the same age and were destroyed together. I found the last piece and transformed it into the world of deities. I hoped that he could be reborn, which could take billions of years, but it never happened." There was a hint of sadness in the girl's eyes as she spoke. Although she didn't elaborate on the matter, Su Ping could imagine that countless excellent stories that took place since the Age of Chaos actually had the Mother of Chaos behind them. "I saw how chaos fell to pieces. I tried to gather the power once more to resist the heavenly Tao. So I found the first candidate and raised him all the way to the undying state. I gave him Sorcerer Ancestor Qiu and Qi's Chaos qualification, so he could turn into a new Sorcerer Ancestor. That was the first battle against the heavenly Tao that I prepared." Light flashed in the girl's eyes. Countless species seemed to be flashing by as she recalled, but all of them collapsed. "I failed in the end," she whispered. "In that battle, the original dragon's ancestor was suppressed and absorbed by the heavenly Tao. Han Yu also surrendered and became their puppet." Su Ping was stunned. The original dragon's ancestor was suppressed and absorbed. He remembered the enormous ancestral dragon, whose eyes were as big as planets. Its pressure was absolutely domineering, and yet it was suppressed and absorbed by the heavenly Tao. To top it off, Sorcerer Ancestor Han Yu, the one who chose to cover the retreat, surrendered to the heavens in the end. Then the things that I've experienced. All of it happened before the war. They had already fought the heavenly Tao before I organized them. Later on, they fought by my side," said the girl. "Of all the cultivation sites you visited, the Chaos cultivation site was the only universe I ever constructed. You may consider it an illusory land, so it requires a lot of energy. This would obviously make the ticket fee much more expensive." Chapter 1533, 6-1. "They were only illusions constructed by me, but they truly existed in the past." The girl stared at Su Ping and said, "The remains of high heavens that you visited once was a place and time before the First War. Back then, Sorcerer Ancestor Hun Yu and Sorcerer Ancestor Yuan Long had already forged an alliance along with the first host to fight the heavenly Tao in the Chaos era. Naturally, the battle ended with a brutal failure. I escaped and fell asleep, awakening until a long time passed. I concluded the reason for the failure, and knew it was impossible to defeat the heavens with the remaining forces, as we had never truly cooperated." As she spoke, the girl's eyes were filled with regret. "That's the greatest gap between us and the heavenly Tao. So I found the second host and created the combat system with contract pets, hoping that all the species would be gathered and trained through the contract. The method was truly effective. Thanks to the popularization of the contract pet system, the power of each universe was quickly doubled. Although the total amount was the same, the power they could unleash was 10 times greater than before." Her eyes glittered at the thought. Su Ping gave her a slight nod. He had traveled to many cultivation sites and witnessed all sorts of combat systems, including runes, magic, combat aura, supernatural powers, sorcery, and several others. However, none of them could compare to the contract system. The contract system was invincible in any stage when compared to the rest. The more terrifying fact was its minimal toll on the user. The living creatures with the slightest spirituality in their bodies could quickly master the power of contract and take other species as pets. This multiplication of combat power didn't require years of training. For instance, the kids from rich families could easily reach the peak of the star state and bond with Star Lord pets as long as enough resources were invested in them. The star state was already the superior level in other combat systems. It was even seen as the peak of all combat ability in some universes. After all, star state warriors could travel in space and their bodies were indestructible. They could master the power of laws. They were sage mages in the magic system. However, it was much easier to reach the star state with the contract system than with the magic system. Even a retard could do that with enough resources. The total amount was the same, but their power was increased. Su Ping could understand the one he knew as the system. It was just like the conservation of energy. The total number of experts in the universe was the same. They would be disorganized if they fought individually, but the total amount would drop from 100 to 10 with the contract battle system. The quality of experts improved and the number of individuals declined. However, the total combat ability was improved to an unreachable level. For mortals, the universes were boundless and mysterious. In the eyes of the system, the universes were just like military camps. In order to fight the heavens, she had to gather all the forces in the military camps, teach them better cultivation techniques, and further consolidate their power. Judging from the result, the Second War also ended in failure. Why? Asked Su Ping. The system was still promoting the contract method, either because there wasn't a better option or because another reason led to defeat. The girl smiled bitterly and said, "Technically speaking, it was the third time. In the first war, I woke up and fought the heavenly Tao. In the second war, I raised the first host to fight the heavenly Tao. In the third war, your predecessor mastered the contract method and introduced it to all the universes. He completed the mission I gave him when he advanced to the undying state. During the war, I asked sorcerer ancestor Ling Tai to sign a contract with him as a pet. We gathered the power of all the remaining sorcerer ancestors and universes, but we still lost." There was vague sorrow in the girl's eyes as she added, "The capabilities of the heavenly Tao were beyond our expectation. They are non-living creatures made by the power of other creatures. The casualties in the first two wars and the enormous grief they caused became nourishment for the heavenly Tao. Therefore, although they suffered heavy losses in the second war, they recovered fully by the time the third war was fought. We weren't fully prepared and we lost again." Then she fell into silence, as if she couldn't free herself from those memories. Su Ping frowned a bit. He knew this wasn't something that could be explained with "not fully prepared." After all, that girl was the mother of chaos, who had gathered the power of all the sorcerer ancestors. They must have taken extreme precautions for that war. That is, unless the heavenly Tao tricked them with some sort of disguise. Su Ping knew it was impossible to notice details in such a short amount of time. He didn't say anything, simply waiting in silence for the system to continue. He believed that she had learned a lot from the previous two defeats. After all, the losses on her side were colossal, as it could be perceived based on the privileges of the two former hosts. Chapter 1534, 6-2. The first host was given the Chaos qualification. The second host had a sorcerer ancestor as a pet. When it came to Su Ping's turn, he could only travel to cultivation sites. This wasn't the system being biased. She had simply lost all her resources. In other words, they were much weaker than before to face the heavens. Using the same method would be suicidal. It was pointless. Therefore, since she had chosen a third host, she certainly had something in mind. After a long silence, the system raised her head and glanced at Su Ping. Although we lost the second war, it allowed me to truly understand the nature of the heavenly Tao. In order to prevent the heavenly Tao from profiting off the war, I transferred all living creatures that participated in the war to a chaos timeline. This makes it impossible for the heavenly Tao to absorb the power of their minds. After some rest, they can still fight right now. A chaos timeline. Su Ping was puzzled. Time is really not a big deal for the heavenly Tao, is it? Even he could easily reverse time. The girl stared at Su Ping and said, "The chaos timeline is just a concept so you can understand. As a matter of fact, they are in another universe of chaos. I transformed part of my body into that chaos universe. It blocks the heavenly Tao and they can never find it." Su Ping looked at her while in a slight daze. Although she only talked about it briefly, Su Ping could easily imagine how brutal the battle was. The system gathered all lives to fight against the heavenly Tao. However, she saw their true nature and foresaw how they would fail. She sacrificed part of her body at the end of the bloody war, turning it into a chaos universe to transfer the survivors. The third war ended in total defeat. "Now, what are the odds of us winning in your opinion?" asked Su Ping. The girl looked at him and said, 50%. 50%. Su Ping was surprised, as the number seemed too high in his opinion. He thought that their chances were below the 10% mark. "Back in the Third War, although we failed, we managed to heavily wound the original core of the heavenly Tao. It should be weaker than back then. We did lose 2 sorcerer ancestors in the Third War, but the contract system has been introduced to more universes. The contract system is the mainstream choice in almost every surviving universe. I believe there's a chance for us to win." The girl looked at Su Ping and added, "Also, your performance has been surprising. Based on my training experience, there's only a 48% chance of victory. However, your outstanding performance has increased the odds by 2%. I hope that the upcoming battle will be the endgame. If we fail, there won't be enough time for me to raise a 4th host." Su Ping raised his eyebrows. "You've even planned to raise a 4th host?" "Of course. After all, this concerns all living creatures in all universes. I cannot place my hopes entirely on you," said the girl as she looked at him calmly. "The communal heavenly Tao has been attacking the ancestral land of chaos to force me to show up. They have been getting closer and closer over the years. For you and for all those living, it may seem like countless eons have passed, from the age of chaos to the primordial times and to this day, but it's still the age of chaos actually for me. They're attacking the ancestral land of chaos, like burglars, smashing the windows. I seized the moment and found my first helper when they broke the first window. I found the second helper when he broke the second window." She looked at him again and continued, "You've only cultivated 2,000 years in total, which is just a brief moment in the world of chaos. It would count as a single afternoon in your perception." Su Ping was speechless. Based on what the system said, raising a host was probably no different than casually throwing a seed. "If we lose this war, our odds of winning the next war would be 30% or even lower," the girl sighed. She didn't hide the fact and spoke openly about it. She had watched Su Ping grow and knew that he wouldn't be bothered by such a confession. Su Ping stayed silent. He knew that the system would prepare backup plans in case of failure. The next war was too significant, and she had taken many things into account. He didn't think it was inappropriate of her. After all, he wasn't really confident of ending that protracted war all on his own. From the age of chaos to the ancient times, all the way to the age of space travel, countless species and countless universes had been born. The death of so many lives were probably just flickering butterflies for an ancient and immortal existence like the system. It couldn't be otherwise, as the system had been born ages in the past. She had probably spent more time alone in the chaos universe than the history of all living creatures in all universes combined. It was just that there was no concept of time back then. The great Tao of time had yet to be born at that time. From the primordial times to that day, it was a long scroll from the perspective of living creatures. But for the system, It was just a parallel painting. I hope this is indeed the last war. A 50% chance of winning. Su Ping looked at the system and asked, what were the odds of winning in the previous 2 wars? I didn't calculate carefully in the second war. I think there was a 70% chance of winning. In the third war, it was 60%. The girl looked at Su Ping and said, it may be hard for you to believe, but those 2 failures were because I underestimated the enemy. Back in the third war, I was able to completely figure out everything about the heavenly Tao. So, there won't be any unexpected factors this time. Are you sure? Su Ping was at a loss. Very sure, said the girl with extreme confidence. The answer stunned him. After all, the system was much stronger than him. She could probably think of everything he could think of. He sighed and said, I'm not even a sorcerer ancestor. It's pointless for you to train me, isn't it? I gave away the chaos qualifications when I created my 12 children. So even I am unable to create new sorcerer ancestors at this moment, said the girl regretfully. The previous 2 hosts eventually became stronger than the sorcerer ancestors with my help. Not being one is not a fault of yours. It's my problem. If you raise a 4th host, would he become as strong as me? Asked Su Ping. The girl gave a slight nod. More or less. They'll probably be weaker than you. However, if we can loot a chaos qualification during the war, there's a chance for the next host to become a sorcerer ancestor, or even stronger. Loot it from the heavenly Tao. Yes, it cannot be digested and it's ever permanent, so there's a chance for us to take it back. Su Ping asked, after so many wars, how many sorcerer ancestors are left? 6, said the girl softly. Su Ping was rendered speechless again. You weren't able to beat the heavenly Tao back when you fought alongside the 12 sorcerer ancestors. Now, only 6 are left. Do we really have a chance to win? The girl heaved a sigh. That's the problem. I gave birth to 12 sorcerer ancestors. However, they developed different personalities as I offered them different chaos qualifications. They couldn't cooperate, and the heavenly Tao used this to divide and conquer. Had they worked together, it should have been fairly easy to defeat the heavenly Tao. Su Ping thought of everything he had seen in the remains of high heavens and was able to understand. The system had probably intended for him to see that. If all 6 of them are present, our odds of winning would be close to 70%, said the girl. However, Sorcerer Ancestor Hayashin and Sorcerer Ancestor Hai Xiang have both escaped to the border of chaos and are reluctant to participate in the war. This brings down the odds of winning to only 50%. Su Ping was stunned, so only 4 Sorcerer Ancestors would fight the war. They're unwilling to fight. Why? Su Ping found it hard to believe. They probably think it's a hopeless case, said the girl after a sigh. How will that do? Su Ping had trouble answering. We must find all of them. This isn't a kid's game. Chapter 1535. The War That Spanned Across History 1. They're already beyond my control. They can survive even if chaos falls apart. I can understand that they don't want to get killed, said the girl. We can't ask them to abide by the morals of humankind. Su Ping was momentarily lost for words. Was he standing on the moral high ground? That was indeed the truth. There was no reason for them to sacrifice themselves for billions of unrelated species. Humans preached about the strong lending a HND to the weak, but not even humans were able to follow that ideal. The strong were admired by everyone, while they never pitied the weak. Some weaklings were fun-addicted individuals. They had themselves to blame for their weakness. Su Ping remembered the gods. Such an arrogant species was also destroyed by the heavenly Tao. Was it really worth it to avenge such a species? The 2 sorcerer ancestors probably felt the same. The billions of species were no different from stone and sand in their eyes. Who would feel sad for stepping over grass? Who would feel angry for the cracks on a rock? However, Su Ping found it emotionally unacceptable that someone would simply stay away from the war that concerned all living creatures. Still, he knew that he couldn't hold anyone accountable for those emotions. There's indeed no reason for them to stand up for us. Su Ping whispered, however, Are they willing to be ruled by the heavenly Tao? Do they want to spend the rest of their infinite time hiding from the heavenly Tao? The girl stared at Su Ping and said, I've told them the same. However, they preferred survival over dignity. Don't humans prioritize survival above everything else? Su Ping looked at the system and asked, if they all think this way, will we find any allies? The heavenly Tao is attacking the ancestral land of chaos. If it's eventually controlled by them, chaos will be restarted and all universes will be destroyed. That's why we have to fight. However, the sorcerer ancestors are no longer restrained by chaos, so they wouldn't really be hurt by this. The girl sighed. We're fighting for our own sake. It would be great if they give us a hand. If they don't, we can't blame them. Su Ping looked at her and asked, if the ancestral land of chaos is controlled by the heavenly Tao, would you be affected? I was born in the ancestral land of chaos. If it falls into the hands of the heavenly Tao, I will be gone, said the girl in a calm tone. Su Ping was stunned. She acted as if she were as unaffected as the two sorcerer ancestors she was defending, like mere bystanders who wouldn't be blamed even if they were unwilling to help. He didn't know that the system would be the one worse off. The most ancient life form was at the risk of disappearing. You gave birth to them. They should know that you're in danger, shouldn't they? Asked Su Ping. Are you implying that they should at least return the favor? They've already helped me twice. I can understand their unwillingness to continue fighting. If I truly die, I hope that they can survive. Showing a peaceful smile on her face, she continued, a mother would never blame her child. They would certainly not want their children involved in their battles. Su Ping gradually fell silent upon sensing her calm resolve. If he lost this war, billions of species would disappear. Not participating in the war would mean to simply watch as things unfolded. Calling the two sorcerer ancestors selfish or ruthless was just based on humanity's moral code, which couldn't restrain them. He could only rely on himself for the upcoming battle. I understand. Su Ping no longer pressed on the subject. He had no reason to complain or blame them. You said that the remains of high heavens was an illusion. What about the other cultivation sites? The other cultivation sites were the universes that once existed until they were destroyed in the previous two wars, said the girl softly. So, the people you've seen in those cultivation sites are already dead. I've simply kept their most glorious moments before they died. So the employees you took out of cultivation sites can't leave the store. They're like phantoms. They will consume much more of my energy, or they will disappear. Su Ping couldn't help but clench his fists. Even though he already had an answer, he still felt a stinging pain when he heard it from her. He had met too many people in those cultivation sites, Joanna being the one closest to him. I see, no wonder there's no record of the Archean divinity's destruction, even though Joanna said so. The timelines weren't right. The demigod burial is a piece of the Archean divinity. Its very existence proves that the Archean divinity was destroyed at some point. The way it is on the site is just as I saw it before it was destroyed. I should have realized it. How could I have neglected something so obvious? Su Ping mumbled to himself. I played some tricks on you, all to influence your way of thinking, said the girl calmly. There were some truths that you didn't need to know, so cruel it would have affected your cultivation. I hoped that you could witness darkness without being consumed by it. Su Ping was stunned into silence. He suddenly remembered. He had seen a person with a pair of familiar eyes in a mysterious realm found in the Federation. When he saw Joanna, he felt that their eyes were really similar. So that was Joanna. She was an ascendant state goddess in the demigod burial. The place was eventually destroyed, and so were she and all the celestial experts, including Heather. They didn't turn into ashes when they died, maybe because they were too weak. Their unconscious bodies remained. An energy tide surged when I entered the illusory world and grasped the law of illusion. Someone guided me so I could leave, and someone else blocked the energy tide. Who were they? Su Ping looked at the girl. It was Anna who guided you so you could escape. The other one was a celestial expert who died in the war against the heavenly Tao. They were too weak. Even a plague driven by the heavenly Tao at the edge of the battlefield was enough to destroy them. However, you met them in cultivation sites, said the girl. Su Ping couldn't help but ask. However, the cultivation sites have timelines from way back in the past. They shouldn't have known me when I met them in real life. Why would they help me? The past, the present, and the future are all found in the world of chaos. I extracted them from the projections of the world of chaos and created many cultivation sites. They're not simple illusions, but more like projections. She then added, what you saw was a version of them from the past. Your encounter would appear in their future memories. The memories of living creatures transcend time, so they all know you right now, even though they're already dead. Some of their consciousnesses remained, floating in the void. The time when you had an epiphany in the world of illusion, that energy surge you mentioned was actually released by the heavenly Tao who detected an intruder. She turned to look at him and say, however, many souls of the departed fought against the heavenly Tao to cover for you. You just didn't know that. Anna was the closest to you, so she acted as your guide. The others stayed and fought the heavenly Tao in the depths of the illusory world. Su Ping was stunned. The souls of the dead who were acquainted with him fought against the heavenly Tao for his sake, without him realizing it. Su Ping recalled how he grasped the law of illusion back then. He was too weak at the time, merely a star-state warrior, so he was only able to escape because countless people had helped him. Then about them. Some of them were completely annihilated, said the girl as she gazed at him. His heart shook. It wasn't hard to imagine how strong the heavenly Tao suppressing the world of illusions was. Compelled to know, he said, why would they do that for me? I met a lot of people in cultivation sites, but they weren't really close to me. I don't even think the elders of the Heaven Path Institute wouldn't sacrifice themselves for me. Why would they, right? That's how you think. However, from their perspective, they were probably just betting on you. The girl said softly, when you appeared in the cultivation sites and met them, their current selves realized that you, who showed up out of nowhere in their heads, were my heir. They had wandered for countless years, and they probably wanted to make the last contribution. Su Ping felt that all his blood was boiling. He asked, is there a way to resurrect them? Yes. The girl continued, I've extracted them from the past exactly for this war. I transferred them to the current time and space. They are a sizable force. However, if they die in this war, they will also disappear in the past. Their past would be gone in the world of chaos. Nobody would remember them. If we fail in this war, I will have one last chance to raise a new host. I can extract them from the future and put them in the present. If I fail again, all of them will be gone, and so will I. Lastly, she said as she held eye contact, the heavenly Tao is quickly attacking the ancestral land of chaos, and I've run out of capital. Once the heavenly Tao gains control, all chaos will be restarted. All lives in the past, present, and future will be gone. Not a trace of their existence will remain. This place will turn back to what it was at the beginning. Su Ping had thought that the war would be brutal, but he didn't know it would be to such a degree. The war between the living and the heavenly Tao would span all across history. How many lives had been permanently destroyed in the war? Su Ping looked at the girl before him. The real players in that game were the system and the supreme leader of the heavenly Tao. They were the chess players, and all the living were chess pieces. Su Ping would move as the queen piece under the system's command. She had lost the game 3 times. That would be their 4th match. It was very likely the last one. If she failed, there wouldn't be much left for the system to stage a comeback. Chapter 1536, 10,000 Years of Cultivation 1. You've already woken up and regained your original appearance. When are we going to take action? Asked Su Ping. No rush, said the girl. We'll wait until you reach the limit of the path you found. According to my deduction, you'll be no weaker than a sorcerer ancestor if you walk to the end of that path, even without a chaos qualification. Seriously? Su Ping felt thrilled because of the system's approval. It seemed that he had truly made the right choice. The prospect itself of becoming as strong as a sorcerer ancestor was amazing. Chaos qualifications can grant sorcerer ancestors the ability to dominate chaos. They can create and destroy everything with a thought. Just a thought is needed to condense and blow up thousands of universes. The system continued. There are mainly 3,000 great Taos derived from chaos and hundreds of thousands of lesser Taos. You'll be almost as strong as a sorcerer ancestors when you condense the 3,000 great Taos into universes. However, it's impossible to transform the hundreds of thousands of lesser Taos into undying universes. There's not enough power in the world. We'll set out to fight the heavenly Tao after you create the universes of the 3,000 great Taos. Su Ping was stunned. So, the time set for the war will depend on me. That's right, said the girl. Going by my deductions, you should be able to achieve perfection in 10,000 years. That is when we're going to the ancestral land of chaos to fight the heavenly Tao. Su Ping couldn't help but ask, 10,000 years, wouldn't it be too long? It's a fairly long time for humans, but it's only a brief moment in the ancestral land of chaos. This is an eternal war. Giving you 10,000 years is not a big deal, said the girl. Su Ping had never been to the ancestral land of chaos. However, according to the system, it was clearly a place entirely different from the universes he had lived in. War was still in progress in that place. A lot of things had changed in the outside world over the long time span. Also, the other sorcerer ancestors will join us while you're cultivating. I told them to gather here, said the girl. Su Ping took a deep breath, understanding sunk in. He would fight alongside the 4 sorcerer ancestors once he was done cultivating. The war would decide his fate as well as that of all living creatures in infinite universes. Hiding from the war would be pointless. If the heavens took hold of the ancestral land of chaos, chaos was restarted. All the universes would be destroyed and nobody, except the sorcerer ancestors, would survive. Can I go to cultivation sites right now? Asked Su Ping. Sure. The girl added, now you know the truth about cultivation sites. Some of the creatures you've killed in cultivation sites survived the war, while others died. However, I believe that none of them will hate you after the war ends. Maybe you'll even get to see them again on the battlefield. Su Ping was dazed. He had killed many beasts and enemies in the cultivation sites. For instance, he had killed the rain ancestor and many ancestral god beasts in the Archean divinity. I didn't know that they would be my comrades. Su Ping had mixed feelings about it. Even though they belonged to different timelines, they were fighting for the same goal. I'll take you to meet one of the sorcerer ancestors, said the girl abruptly. Su Ping instantly felt that the store's barrier was gone, and he could fully sense what was happening outside. He then spread his senses and noticed an aura as terrifying as the abyss, standing right outside the store. Sorcerer ancestor. It's sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo, said the girl. The store's door opened. A slender and tall young man walked in. Although human-shaped at the moment, he emitted a ferocious aura as he stepped in, which spread to every corner of the store, like raging octopuses. The rooms closed by the system were also infiltrated by the aura. The usually impregnable store was easily infiltrated by that sorcerer ancestor. Everything inside the store was registered by his senses, without any impediment. Sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo from this place. Slightly dazed, Su Ping looked at the black-robed young man. He knew that the guy's original appearance was too horrifying and indescribable to understand. He only transformed into a young human to facilitate communication. Is he the 3rd guardian you found? He seems to be slightly stronger than the previous 2. The young man looked at our hero with indifference. There was no emotion in his eyes. Even though he assumed a human-like appearance, he didn't emulate their feelings, so he came across as overly cold. That's right, his performance exceeded my expectations. The girl nodded. She looked at Su Ping and chuckled. To make it easier for you to understand my existence, I specifically found a planet named Earth and picked you randomly. That has probably been my best choice. You asked me if I was satisfied with you. I can answer you now. I'm very satisfied. Su Ping glanced at her, not expecting her to remember something from so long before. So his transmigration from Earth was also the system's doing. Chapter 1537, 10,000 Years of Cultivation 2. Just as I thought. I was just polishing my wood that night. How could I transmigrate so easily besides? Real transmigrations only happen in novels. How could it happen in reality? Unless it was imposed by someone, Su Ping thought. He asked, there are many similarities between the history of the blue planet and that of Earth. They're almost the same except for the different celebrities throughout history. You didn't create the blue planet with a specific purpose, did you? The girl shook her head. Of course not. I could have easily created one. That wasn't necessary. There are countless planets in billions of universes. Let alone similar, it's very simple to find a planet named Earth, even with the exact same history. You may find hundreds of planets named Earth with basically the same history. Evolution is basically the same after all, especially when it's related to ordinary lives. They would naturally repeat the process from the primitive age to the Industrial Revolution. Su Ping was stunned for a moment. He knew that the system wasn't wrong, but that also implied that there were too many universes in chaos, so many that it was easy to find another Earth. The war he had to win concerned all the lives on those planets. Did you really pick me as the third host with a random draw? Don't you have any requirements? For example, carrying some ancient bloodline? Or was I the reincarnation of some ancestral god? Su Ping thought that it couldn't have been that arbitrary. Ancestral gods, reincarnations aren't so rare. I can easily create an ancestral god. However, such creations are nothing special. The girl added casually, I picked you randomly, but I knew you would achieve great things under my wing. On the contrary, if I went and specifically picked some genius with extraordinary intelligence, I might not have been able to fully bring out their strong suit. At the end of the day, it's not potential but experience that matters in cultivation. Whether you're smart or stupid in the beginning, you'll be exactly what I want you to be after I give this experience to you. Su Ping was stunned. The system was exceptionally proud. Everything can be trained. The lives in this world may have thousands of faces, but most of them tend to use the same kind. The only thing that matters is the perspective you choose to understand them, said the girl. Su Ping sighed. I thought you were captivated by my handsomeness. The girl rolled her eyes at Su Ping and said, your looks mean nothing to me. We don't share the same aesthetics. I do agree that absolute beauty may have appeal across species. But you don't have it. He. The girl was aware of Su Ping's personality and left the matter at that. She said, in the beginning I wanted to ask Ti Chu to sign a contract with you as your pet. However, it's not easy for him to come and join the war after the previous two failures. You can only count on those little buddies of yours. Fortunately, their performance isn't too bad. At least they won't drag you down. Su Ping was surprised by the previous plans. He looked at the young man in black, not expecting the system to try to persuade the fellow. I remember how Ling Tai was absorbed. It was so stupid. I won't sign a contract with him. Sorcerer Ancestor Ti Chu snorted and continued. The contract is used to control subordinates. I don't want to get involved with him in any way, especially regarding a consciousness bond. The girl heaved a sigh, as if recalling a matter in the past. She said to the now confused Su Ping. The second host bonded with Sorcerer Ancestor Ling Tai. They practiced together a lot to improve their teamwork. However, they lost the war and the second host died. Ling Tai had a chance to escape. Sorcerer Ancestor Ti Chu sneered and said, however, he had to get himself killed. He said he would take back half the guy's corpse, but only got himself killed in the end. Su Ping was again surprised by the information, and could easily imagine how things unfolded. The second host died. Sorcerer Ancestor Ling Tai, an expert that Su Ping had never met, charged to attack the heavenly Tao to avenge him. Su Ping understood the bond that was formed through a contract. It was the connection between two souls. Once two parties bonded with a contract, Their minds would become engaged, and they would inevitably develop feelings for each other, unless it was a pet completely disinterested about their master. Emotion is harmful. That's what killed Ling Tai, said Ti Chuo coldly. It's not just me. The other three won't do something that's stupid either. Su Ping glanced at the latter. He was obviously scared he would do the same as sorcerer ancestor Ling Tai did. That's all right. I'll be by your side, said the girl to Su Ping. He then looked back at the system and her clear eyes, suddenly realizing that the system was the one that had accompanied him for the longest time. No matter when or where, she was always with him. Su Ping gazed at the system and said, "The so-called system binding between you and me should be a pet contract, right? It's just that you're the master while I stand in as a pet." The girl also stared back as she replied, "That's right. I helped you in the same way you train your pets." "Then why can't I feel what's on your mind?" asked Su Ping immediately. "Because I shielded it," said the girl. "I'm the mother of chaos. My mind is too vast and magnificent. You'd only find it unbearable and go crazy if I left it open. You're too weak to bear it even right now. I won't remove the shielding until you get the chaos qualification and become a sorcerer ancestor." Su Ping understood, yet the situation gave him mixed feelings. He felt somewhat angry and weird. He had trained the little skeleton, the dark dragon hound, and his other pets, and considered himself an excellent battle pet warrior. He never expected to actually be someone else's pet. This particular someone else was the mother of chaos, the very first life that ever existed, but he still felt weird. He didn't feel uncomfortable about it, though, because he never thought that pets were inferior to their masters. The contract was not about superiority, it was a bond of equals. However, one party would take the lead due to the difference in strength. In other words, Su Ping became the pet, now that the system had truly awakened and took hold of her original power. He had been the system's master in the past. That was why he was called the host. "Did you ask this sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo to gather the refugees from all universes to this place?" asked Su Ping. The girl nodded. It already began when the Third War ended. "However, the way they are managing things here is rather chaotic," said Su Ping. "Can such an unorganized mob really unite against the heavenly Tao?" "That's not for you to worry about. When the time comes, I'll put them in my universe and use their bodies as strength. They must participate in the war, even if they're unwilling," said sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo coldly. Su Ping frowned. "What do you mean? Are you saying that you use them as fuel?" "Fuel, good analogy. That's basically it," said the unemotional sorcerer ancestor. "It's what they're born for. I'm making the best use of them." Su Ping said in a somber tone, "But they're alive. They're living creatures. This is exactly how lives should be used. Or do they have some special meaning to you?" Ti Chuo gave Su Ping an unhappy look. He could sense the latter's fury, but he found it ridiculous. To put it simply, rocks, metals, and lives each has their own prices. Lives are 5, metals are 2, and rocks are 1. Only living creatures see themselves as priceless compared to rocks and metals. However, all of them are objects in our eyes. "Not really." Su Ping looked at him solemnly. "Lives are not priceless, but they shouldn't be squandered either. Besides, yours is the most extravagant usage method of all. They could be sharp blades on their own, but you regard them as fuel. Even if you consider them to be pieces of metal, you're turning them into a mere handle when they could be used to forge the edge of a blade." Chapter 1538, Lives 1. Sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo sneered and said, "My method is indeed rather barbaric, but it's the most effective and efficient. Are you hopping to train them all together? They are from millions of different species with different personalities and interests. Some even think that war is sinful. There are ways to subdue and unite them. However, the efficiency is too low and it's unnecessary. After all, we can still make the best use of them my way." Su Ping said, "If you can give me 10,000 years to cultivate, you can also adjust time and give them 1,000,000 years to cultivate and cooperate. 1,000,000 years is unnecessary if you simply want them to cooperate as a team. I can easily do that, but it's pointless." Sorcerer Ancestor Ti Chuo continued. People like you rule over the bottom level of society through morals, law, doctrines, and religion, just to turn them all into handy blades that won't hurt you. When commanders plan to attack, they calculate the army needed and study the terrain. Lives are just simple numbers. In a similar way, when kings consider whether or not to develop a region, they would also consider economical and environmental factors. In any case, when a decision-maker does something, the efficiency of the lives at his disposal is his primary concern. They're just fuel, like you said. Whether or not they can succeed, how far they can go, and how they can make the best use of them are what rulers think about. He looked at Su Ping with a cold smile. If I want to, I can directly modify their memories to have them see each other as blood relatives. It's like the changes caused by religion or morals. You people are too weak and can only resort to external factors. However, I can do that with a single thought. But that would be pointless. He continued, it's no different from directly throwing them into my universe and using them as fuel. If the ancestral land of chaos is destroyed, they will die. If we lose the war, they die. Anyway, they will die in the end, so their short lives are meaningless. They are like bugs in the world of chaos. 10,000 years is a long time for them, but it's just a nap for us. He paused to chuckle. I've studied humans before. I know all of your culture and teachings. Do you think that ants' lives have any meaning? Have you ever thought that an ant has led a meaningful life? If you do think that was the case, do you think the invisible germs on your hand live a special life? Would you cherish, respect, and care about them? Su Ping fell silent after the ancestor's barrage of questions. Indeed, in a sense, he couldn't retort. That was the most ironic thing about life. Those who advocated love and equality were always the weak. The rich would never be willing to share their money with the weak. They only wanted to earn more money. When someone reached a certain height, they would ignore those beneath them. Lives were indeed priceless. However, every life had a price in other people's hearts. Just like sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo, all lives were fuel in his eyes. They were just energy with the ability to move. All species and creatures are the same. You're right, Su Ping heaved a soft sigh. Naturally, sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo laughed, knowing he was right. He didn't need Su Ping to compliment him. In fact, he even thought that praising a sorcerer ancestor was hilarious. However, Su Ping gazed at him and said, you may despise and scorn others since you have such a high status, but that's just you. The meaning of life is not given by anyone else, but by oneself. If you think you're living a meaningful life, it is meaningful. Nobody else can judge you. Some people are worthless in the eyes of others, but they themselves think they live terrific lives and they are happy. That is enough. You can't define the meaning found by others. You can only define their meaning in your perspective. Maybe those lives can't change the world of chaos and they will eventually disappear. They're like the billions of stars and the dust in the sky. You wouldn't care about them, but they live a great life. That's good enough. Sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo dropped his smile and snorted. Nonsense, you don't understand at all. I don't need to understand, Su Ping said. All I know is that they should know what they'll be facing, as they will take part in the war. I believe that many of them are here hopping to avenge their families. They truly want to contribute to this war. They are not simple fuel. I believe that they are racking their brains about how to get stronger and how to fight better in the war, and they will work hard until the last moment before the fight starts. Maybe not all species would act like this, but there are definitely some among them. So I cannot ignore their determination, and I woe. Maybe we'll lose this war. Maybe we'll disappear. Maybe the ancestral land of chaos will be destroyed and chaos will be restarted, but at least we were here. We fought while we were still alive. We felt joy and grief. We loved and we hated. Even if we can only end as ashes, we will still think that our lives are meaningful. Chapter 1539, Lives 2. You have to bear in mind that the war they're going to take part in is very meaningful too, said Su Ping while staring at sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo. All living beings lose their consciousness upon death. The ancestral land of chaos means nothing to those who have died. Even you, a mighty sorcerer ancestor, are also meaningless to those who are no longer among the living. So, it's enough to feel meaningful when you're alive. Tichuo said with a gloomy expression, "You dare argue with me?" "What do you want?" Su Ping stared back at him. "I don't think he is wrong," said the girl to intervene, suppressing the two parties' rising auras. She glanced at Su Ping while addressing Tichuo. "Maybe we've failed time and again exactly because of that way of thinking. All species are the same. Every living being is the same. However, just because living creatures share that common instinct doesn't mean that it's right. There's no right or wrong in this world, just the strong or the weak," said the ancestor after a snort. Su Ping stared at him and said to the girl, "I hope that when I'm not cultivating, I can gather and train all species here. I will turn them into a team to maximize their combat abilities." "Humph, why bother? I can just tweak their memories," said Tichuo. Su Ping said with a ruthless tone, "Sure, you can directly modify memories. However, doing so will only make their lives develop by only following a trajectory that you've set. They wouldn't be any different from walking corpses. Indeed, it would be as efficient as using them as fuel. However, the greatest difference between living creatures and non-living creatures is the miracle of life. Such a miracle depends on diversity. It cannot be preset. Some people may remain idle, but others may unleash brilliant and unimaginable power. This isn't something achievable by just modifying memories." Sorcerer Ancestor Tichuo snorted. "That being said, the efficiency is too low. You'd better focus on strengthening yourself. The Heavenly Tao army is already attacking the ancestral land of chaos. War can start at any moment. We're just waiting for you." The girl looked at Su Ping and said, "If you want to do it, just do it. I know you, I won't stop you. Don't forget that I'm your system. I will always take your side." Tichuo was furious. Su Ping felt dazed as he looked at the girl's gentle eyes. For a moment he found it hard to believe that the girl was the same system who sometimes argued with him and peeped at his thoughts. "I understand," Su Ping nodded. "Humph, just spoil him, will you?" Sorcerer Ancestor Tichuo was rather angry. He glared at the girl and left. The girl watched him leave. She turned around and smiled at Su Ping, then said, "Although I gave birth to the 12 sorcerer ancestors, all 3 hosts are essentially my children too." Su Ping felt helpless over this matter. Speaking of children, he couldn't get used to being regarded as a child by someone who bickered with him all the time. "I always thought we were peers." "That was just you overthinking. You can be the one on top." "That's impossible." Su Ping shook his head and said, "I'll keep cultivating then. By the way, considering your current strength, it shouldn't be a problem to suppress sorcerer ancestors, is it?" "It's not too hard," said the girl with a smile. Su Ping nodded and asked again, "What level are you?" "The sorcerer ancestors you mentioned, they can gather thousands of universes with a thought thanks to their chaos qualifications. What about you? What are you capable of? I find it hard to understand. The most ultimate power in this world can only destroy thousands of universes at the same time, right?" "I'm similar to them except that I'm stronger. How should I put it? Mine is a better quality," the girl chuckled. Su Ping nodded. The system did know him well. Her explanation was easy to follow. "All right, I'll go and cultivate then," Su Ping winked. "I don't need to pay energy points now, do I?" "It's on me. Just go," said the girl. "Consider it a reward for upgrading the store." "How generous." Su Ping raised his thumb. Then he noticed that Joanna was standing still, like a statue. There was definitely something wrong with her. After learning everything from the system, he knew that the system had temporarily paused her. "Let's meet again on the battlefield," Su Ping said to the paralyzed beauty. He selected a cultivation site and went in with the dark dragon hound and his other pets. There was no way of knowing if the system was lending a hand, but Su Ping realized that he was encountering more ancestral gods in the advanced cultivation sites, obtaining a lot of Tao power from each hunt. The number of condensed universes grew. "System, the power I'm absorbing is yours?" Su Ping asked. More or less, said the system. You don't need to feel guilty. No, I mean, can't you just transfer the power directly to me? Wouldn't it be much faster? Su Ping made a face like a curious baby. Her reply was definitely brief. Get lost. I mean it, said Su Ping. I mean it too, the system said. You're hunting, absorbing, and digesting the power of those ancestral gods. New battles come to you all the time. The whole process is simple, which also helps you become acquainted with your new power. It's no different from a direct energy transfer. Su Ping thought for a moment and realized it was true. Time went by. Su Ping kept on training in cultivation sites day after day. Outside the store, on Sorcerer Ancestor Ti Chu's continent, more species arrived and were arranged on the allotted territories. I will only try my best in the next war. High above, two figures were overseeing the continent. They were Sorcerer Ancestor Ti Chu and the girl. I'll run if we encounter danger. I don't want to die, I hope you can understand, said Ti Chu as he turned to look at the girl. There was more in his eyes than the usual coldness. He seemed to be troubled by the situation. There was gentleness, regret, and affection. She answered with a slight nod. It's fine as long as you try your best. I don't want to see you perish here either. I've lost enough children as it is. Ti Chuo heaved a sigh and spoke softly to the void. Probably going to be here soon. The girl nodded. I can feel where they are. They'll be here in 3,000 years. That's early. We'll get to meet them very soon. He spoke while feeling a jumble of emotions. I wonder if they're weaker now. They were terribly beaten up in the previous two wars. We should get ready too. It's time to have the sealed weapons return, said the girl. Ti Chuo nodded. Let's reverse the yellow spring and summon them back. We'll have them become familiar with each other sooner. I'll help him train them. He's right. Those species need to be trained and coordinated, said the girl. Do you really support his theory? It's just a bad habit that lingers from his weakling original self, even though he has already reached the undying state. Besides, he's not a mythical creature begotten by nature. Sorcerer Ancestor Ti Chuo frowned. Our theory failed, that's why I'd like to give his idea a try, said the girl, staring at her child. I also think that what he said and thought wasn't wrong. Those lives don't know anything about you and me. We are also meaningless in their eyes. It would be for the best to let them know that they're going to embrace their doom. Otherwise, their fate would be just too pitiful. You find them pitiful. That's an emotion only felt by the weak, said Ti Chuo. Emotion is a power too. There's nothing wrong about it, said the girl. Chapter 1540, Gathering 1. Inside the store. In a certain room, Tang Ruyan peered through a window and looked at the figures who were walking in a hurry outside and the long line in front of the door. She felt quite puzzled by this. We don't have to do business anymore. She felt that everything was different ever since the store changed. There was also a strange sense of urgency. The store is still operating, although in a different way, said Green Lady. She had signed a contract with the store and received a notification from the Mother of Chaos. She also had an inkling of the situation outside, but she didn't know a lot. After all, she was too weak to understand everything. Even so, business seems to have paused for a long time, said Tang Ruyan. And Anna is gone too. Is she in one of the cultivation sites? She's in the store, she's just asleep. Green Lady wore a troubled expression. Asleep. Maybe it'll be a whole different view when she wakes up, said Green Lady with a gloomy voice. She looked into the distance without fear in her eyes. Instead, she seemed to be missing someone. Maybe she would be able to see him very soon. The Twilight Deity King. Somewhere in the human territory, Shen Huang and the other leaders were holding a meeting. Sorcerer Ancestor Ti Chu has ordered all species to train and cooperate to fight the Heavenly Tao. We're going to fight the Heavenly Tao. We will probably succeed under the lead of the Sorcerer Ancestor. There are myriads of species and forces here. It would be strange not to succeed. Kai Wang and the other dominators received news from the Ti Chuo clan. They were all excited. Sorcerer Ancestors were at the apex of all cultivation in their eyes, the ultimate lives in the world. If they couldn't defeat the heavenly Tao, wouldn't everything be destroyed? As long as the sorcerer ancestor takes action, the heavenly Tao will be suppressed in no time, said one of them, confident in the ancestor's power. That's right, all that we need to do is offer a helping hand. Aside from the human clan, the other species also became excited when they learned this. Some of them had lived there for hundreds of millions of years, even producing 10 generations of dominators. As for the ordinary beings, there had been too many generations to count. They already considered that place as their hometown. All kinds of discussions arose upon learning about the war against the heavenly Tao. Heavenly Tao, what is that? The sorcerer ancestor is protecting us. Do we really need to do anything? That's right. Wouldn't we be causing trouble for the sorcerer ancestor if we attacked? I for one will cheer for the sorcerer ancestor. The beings of the heavenly Tao, they seem to be the enemies that our distant ancestors mentioned. According to our records, the original universe we lived in was destroyed by the heavenly Tao, and we had to escape. We were lucky that sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo took us in. They were our ancestors' enemies. That makes them my enemies too. All the warriors will march to war under the sorcerer ancestor's command to avenge our ancestors, save for the priest and the 6 generals. The priest has also been summoned. The sorcerer ancestor has ordered everybody in the clan to participate, except for bobbies and weaklings. There will be a war 10,000 years from now, and all species will to the death. What? The news quickly spread. The species that had just arrived were excited, never expecting that war would start so soon. The species that had been sheltered much earlier had already forgotten the hatred. They had been living in peace and considered that place as their home. They panicked at the mention of a total war and sent their objections to the Ti Chuo clan, but they were promptly scolded. Even though there were obedient and resistant species, drilling practices soon began under the command of sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo. The species were all reorganized. Those who had disputes over territory were asked to cooperate. The Mother of Chaos controlled everything in the name of sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo. She taught everyone the chaos array of 1,000 souls. It was the most miraculous array that could accommodate an infinite number of beings. That also meant that its potential was unlimited. All the species were the fireflies providing power for the chaos array. Time flew. 1,000 years later, practicing the use of the grand array had already become a habit that all species were accustomed to. The array gradually took shape thanks to their continuous practice. Another 2,000 years passed. In the void beyond sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo's continent, a scorching aura was sweeping over. A brilliant crescent moon appeared in the darkness. The crescent moon grew in size and became full. It was a planet billions times bigger than the sun. It was red and bright, emitting a heat capable of melting everything. That scorching behemoth of a fireball arrived at the Ti Chuo continent. It didn't lose to the massive terrain in size. 2 figures dashed out from the continent and reached a place in the void. On the burning planet, there was the soft shriek of a phoenix. Then, the flamed ancestor of all birds appeared out of nowhere. "Golden Crow, I didn't expect you to be the first to arrive," said Ti Chuo indifferently. It was presenting his original appearance, a frightening vision that seemed to be made of thousands of ears and eyes. It was creepy. The golden crow had also revealed its appearance. It was a golden bird filled with scorching flames. The feathers making its wings turned out to be arms that had tiny and scary mouths spouting flames. Mother of Chaos. The golden crow ignored Ti Chuo, simply focusing on the petite girl who seemed to be alone in the world. Although short and small, she seemed to be the center of the universe. Everybody could see her clearly, even if she was thousands of kilometers away. It was very strange. "You've been recuperating since the last war. How's your recovery?" asked the Mother of Chaos in a soft voice, gentleness conveyed by her eyes. The golden crow ancestor had been living in seclusion and resting for a really long time just for the 4th war. It was also the first to arrive in answer to her summons. After raising 3 hosts in a row, She had also been influenced by feelings that were unique to ordinary beings. "I've regained 90% of my power. I'm not fully healed yet, but I can fight," said the bird ancestor coldly. Its voice was the opposite of the heat it released. It was chilling. "Thank you for your trouble," said the girl with a sigh. Dazed, the golden crow ancestor stared at her and said, "You've changed. It seems that the heavenly Tao had a huge influence on you in the last war. Your feelings are more intense than before. Emotion is nourishment for the heavenly Tao. Although heartless, they feed on them. It would be for the best if you could heal soon, or it'll be a weakness in the upcoming war." "I've warned her, but I couldn't make her change her mind," said Tichuo, shaking his head. The mother of chaos smiled. "I've learned how to use emotions as a strength, just like the heavenly Tao does. A counterattack with their own methods is a good strategy. Don't worry. If anything goes wrong in the war, I'll take my leave immediately." The golden crow ancestor stared at her and then nodded. He suddenly turned and looked at a certain place in the depth of space. Tichuo was acting casual. Half the eyes on his body looked in a particular direction. He was the one with the keenest senses among the 12 sorcerer ancestors. That was the reason why the Mother of Chaos had decided that place as a gathering point. Tichuo was able to avoid the heavenly Tao without being exposed. That was also the reason he was able to survive in the previous wars. All of a sudden, an amazing view was displayed in the void. The usually transparent void suddenly began to fold and spread like ripples. The next moment, a black light flashed before the ones gathered. It was like teleportation. However, there was no such thing as teleportation or deep spaces in the world of chaos. The so-called teleportation in other worlds was akin to a slow turtle movement in the world of chaos. There was only one species that boasted such an unbelievable speed in the world of chaos, one that could almost compete with teleportation. "Sorcerer ancestor Yin Kue, you are slower than the golden crow this time," said Tichuo casually. An enormous bird made an appearance with a purely dark body. Anyone who looked at it would only see a massive black shape. Only its 4 eyes were extremely bright. Each eyeball was the size of a planet, brilliant and sharp. It seemed that they wouldn't only consume rays but also thoughts. There was a sensation of falling into an abyss when gazing at the creature. Wills and souls would be dragged and consumed. Staring at that being was not possible. "I came from the edge of chaos. He was closer. Is it surprising that he came here faster than me?" said sorcerer ancestor Yin Kue with a pleasant yet chilling voice that would make people feel instinctively frightened. "I heard that you've been stopping the heavenly Tao from attacking the ancestral land of chaos, and you've been hunted because of this." The golden crow ancestor looked at the new arrival with troubled feelings. "The Mother of Chaos wouldn't have had the time to raise the 4th kid if I hadn't done that. Fortunately, the heavenly Tao couldn't catch up to me. They tried to ambush me several times, but they were too slow," said Yin Kue casually. It was the fastest amongst the 12 sorcerer ancestors. In terms of speed, sorcerer ancestor Kun Peng, ranked 2nd, was far inferior. "Thank you very much," said the Mother of Chaos softly. Slightly dazed, Yin Kue looked at her. "What's up with that?" She answered with silence and a smile. "I was the last to arrive, huh?" said a hoarse voice. A fuzzy figure slowly moved closer from a place in chaos. It looked like countless shadows flickering, with an oval-shaped body made of countless worms. It was indescribably terrifying. "I'm surprised that you were willing to show up," said Yin Kue casually. "Since this is going to be the last time, it would be better for me to see the outcome. I won't take part in this again if you fail. I will sleep forever with my Tao of Death and wait for chaos to restart," said the hoarse voice. "Huh, is it any different from death?" asked the golden crow ancestor casually. Tichuo glanced at the latter and said, "Golden crow, you were struck by the heavenly Tao and affected by their power. Looks like you haven't fully fixed it." "That's why I said that I'm only 90% recovered," said the golden crow ancestor coldly. The Mother of Chaos smiled and said to the speaker with a hoarse voice, "Shi Mang, please bring a little thing back to life for me." Is it necessary to resurrect those little things? Sorcerer Ancestor Shimeng asked back. Although it was in control of the Tao of Death and could resurrect all living creatures, it rarely did so. That creature thought that those lives weren't worthy enough to be resurrected, and the resurrection process would only be a waste of energy. It's very important to a certain someone, said the girl with a smile. Will it influence the war? Asked Shimeng. More or less, she said. In that case, I will find it, said the somber ancestor. Chapter 1541, Before the Last War Won. Just after Shimeng finished talking, a chaos projection appeared in the void near him. Countless figures from billions of races, since the birth of time, were flashing by in that projection, leaving fuzzy images that quickly disappeared. The strong ones among them would stop, giving yearning gazes at the power they sensed from beyond the projection. Sorcerer Ancestor Shimeng ignored those lingering figures. He waved a hand and released a stream of power that pushed them away, making them disappear in the crowd of specters. Found it, Shimeng said all of a sudden. One of the gray tentacles on his body passed through the projection and picked up a petite figure from amongst the crowd. That's it, the Mother of Chaos nodded with a smile. She had already given him a reference of the little skeleton's aura so that it could be found. What a weak creature, Shimeng shook his head, quickly sensing that the guy was extremely weak. He could kill that creature 1,000,000,000 times with a single breath. A stream of power surged in, making the petite projection gradually turn from an illusion to a tangible being. It was now emitting the energy of life. It was an undead creature, yet it still emitted the power of life. How much longer do we have to wait for that guy? Yin Kue asked on the other side. The girl said, about 7,000 years. All right, we'll just take a break then, said the fellow. The Golden Crow ancestor's eyes glittered. I haven't seen this kid in a long time. I wonder how he's doing. He should be very happy to see you. The Mother of Chaos smiled with an ancient tranquility, gentle and mysterious. She slightly waved a hand, and the little skeleton flew over to her. Dumbfounded, the small pet raised its head and looked at this indescribably gorgeous woman, able to sense her terrifying power. There seemed to be an infinite amount of strength in her slender body. However, the small fellow wasn't scared at all. Rather, it had a strong sense of familiarity. The Mother of Chaos silently disappeared into the void with the little skeleton. The sorcerer ancestors exchanged glances and dispersed. A brilliant and golden figure flew out from the scorching planet floating in the void. Its feathers seemed to be made of fire crystals. Sorcerer Ancestor, is that Sorcerer Ancestor Ti Chu's clan? That's right, your old friend is right there. The Golden Crow ancestor chuckled. Old friend, I heard that he's the one who proposed the alliance. He's also the representative of the legendary Mother of Chaos. No wonder he was able to advance so fast that I couldn't even catch up to him, said the brilliant Golden Crow. Her voice was loud and clear, like a spirit of fire. No need to hold yourself back. If you want to see him, just go and meet him, said the Golden Crow ancestor. After that, it gradually disappeared into the enormous planet. That was the only celestial body floating quietly in the void, at a certain distance from the Ti Chuo continent. Strangely enough, none of the species living on the continent had noticed the scorching planet in the sky. They were fairly close, but they seemed to be in different spaces. In the store, Su Ping returned from his expeditions to the cultivation sites. The dark dragon hound and all his other pets had become ancestral gods, and he had managed to condense 1,000 undying universes. Ancestral gods were vulnerable against him. He could crush them with ease. His combat ability had already surpassed the undying state, but he wasn't a sorcerer ancestor yet. Thanks to the boost of his 1,000 universes, Su Ping's senses could easily cover the entire Ti Chuo continent. He could sense the immeasurable power of the host sorcerer ancestor, which was as vast as an ocean. The more clearly Su Ping sensed that power, the more deeply he realized how wide the gap between them was. Even if he condensed 3,000 universes and reached the ultimate perfection, he could hardly compare to the 12 ancestors. The gap between sorcerer ancestors and experts in the undying state is truly too wide. The chaos mythical creatures spawned by nature are truly peerless when compared to the other creatures that were born afterwards. Su Ping sighed regretfully, but he wasn't too frustrated. At least he was the strongest person in history, only second to the sorcerer ancestors. Huh. Su Ping's eyes suddenly glittered. Shocked, he looked in a certain direction inside the store. Two figures were standing there. One was the system and the other was the little skeleton. Su Ping's pupils twitched. He dashed forward to the little skeleton, his body shaking. He squatted and stared at the little fellow. This feeling was so familiar that his blood felt like it was flowing backwards. I asked sorcerer ancestor Shi Mang to resurrect it, said the mother of chaos with a smile. Su Ping looked at the system gratefully. Thanks. You should have already seen through life and death. Given your current level, no need to thank me, said the girl. Su Ping shook his head and said, no matter what level I am, or whether I've seen the truth about life and death, even if I can create everything with a thought, I wouldn't destroy everything with a thought. The girl glanced at him and sighed. I picked a human as the third host. I wonder if it was the right decision. Humans were born after the heavenly Tao age, and you're too badly influenced by it. Feelings and emotions are the heavenly Tao's sustenance. If your feelings are too strong, the consequences will be dire if you're defeated and absorbed by our ultimate enemy. Chapter 1542, Before the Last War 2. Considering your wisdom, you must have taken into account the risk of failure and made precautions for it, right? Said Su Ping. The mother of chaos nodded. That's right. If you fail, I will immediately cut off all feelings, yours and those of all species. Su Ping glanced at her in silence. He simply turned to look at the little skeleton, only to discover that its contract aura had already disappeared. Two crimson lights appeared in the small fellow's eyes, as if it was gazing at him curiously. The little skeleton was currently an unowned pet. Considering its level, it could be seen as a ferocious beast. Su Ping didn't feel any killing intent coming from the little skeleton, though. The feeling was warm. Even without the contract, the little skeleton wouldn't hurt him. Let's fight side by side again, said Su Ping softly. He raised a finger and the force of a contract appeared on his fingertip. The little skeleton looked at the light and retreated a bit as if scared. However, it didn't flee. It was only one step back. Its eyes were glittering, as if the light triggered some of its memories. Su Ping then laid his finger on the small fellow's forehead and established a contract. His mind was then connected to a weak and ignorant consciousness. It felt like a sting in his heart. That familiar feeling was unforgettable, even to that day. It was like when he established a contract with the little skeleton for the first time. Back then, the fellow had just been born and could barely walk. The combat ability gap between them was even greater now. However, the feeling was still the same. I've been keeping the memories that you forgot, said Su Ping softly. He was about to transfer those memories to the little one through their bond. But the next moment, the little skeleton jumped over and clung to his arm. Dazed, Su Ping raised his hand and touched the little skeleton's cold and smooth head. Even without memories, that familiar feeling had never disappeared. His lips curled and his laughter became louder. Once he was done laughing, he sent all the memories to the little skeleton. The little skeleton grew pensive all of a sudden. After a long time passed, the little one raised its head again. There was a familiar feeling in the fire of its eyes. Their bond allowed Su Ping to confirm that the little skeleton was truly back. Welcome home, Su Ping hugged the fellow. The mother of chaos lowered her head and watched with a vague smile on her face. Kid, are you in there? Said a pleasant voice all of a sudden. Slightly dazed, Su Ping spread out his senses and saw a mature and beautiful woman standing outside the store. She looked quite beautiful. Dazed for a moment, his eyes instantly widened. It's you. Looks like you're truly there. The graceful figure walked in and then noticed the mother of chaos next to Su Ping. Her casual smile was instantly gone. She became nervous and hesitant, not daring to step up. The mother of chaos smiled casually and said, Little golden crow, you may speak. She then gradually faded away. However, Su Ping sensed that her aura was still around. She didn't truly leave. This made him feel more or less weird. After seeing the Mother of Chaos, he had gradually been able to separate her from his image of the system, but it seemed that her peeping habits had never changed. Who would have thought that the most superior chaos life form is a peeper? Su Ping secretly complained. He stood up and said to the slender figure before him, "Dickyong, why did you come here?" He had heard that except for the remains of high heavens, which was an illusion, all the cultivation sites were real but ran in different timelines he couldn't understand. They were both dead and alive. All in all, they couldn't be seen without the system. "I'm not dead, why can't I come here?" Dickyong snorted. "The war is drawing near. Our ancestor came out from seclusion and led us here." The Golden Crow ancestor, Su Ping understood. That mighty being was indeed capable of traveling from the unknown past on its own. "I didn't expect that you would already reach the undying state. You're indeed something," said Su Ping with a sigh. He visited the Golden Crows, world 500 years in the past, and Dickyong was only in the Tao Heart state back then. Even though it was a level just before the undying state, the cultivation required to advance was tens of thousands of years, or even longer. He was the exception, as he had the store's advantage. "Humph, that explains why you improved so fast. The Mother of Chaos trained you. No wonder you surpassed me," said Dickyong angrily. Her confidence had been struck as Su Ping surpassed her time and again. She even suspected the purity of her bloodline. "It wouldn't have been difficult to surpass you, even without the Mother of Chaos," Su Ping chuckled. "Stop bragging. Do you want to compete?" How Dickyong was stunned. Su Ping said, "How about a tongue twister? We'll see who's faster." Dickyong rolled her eyes and couldn't be bothered to argue with the guy. She gazed at Su Ping and said, "I heard that you're going to fight alongside 4 of the sorcerer ancestors. You're actually going to shoulder the responsibility as one of them. Can you do that? The heavenly Tao is unimaginably strong, if nothing else." "What else can I do? I have to fight even if I can't win. I don't have a choice," said Su Ping. Dickyong gritted her teeth. "If nothing else, I'll talk to the ancestor and ask him to take you away. Considering my ancestor's power, we can just seal the planet and live in seclusion for the rest of our lives." Slightly dazed, Su Ping stared at her, then shook his head a long time later. He said, "Destruction is no better than eternal imprisonment. I'll do my best in this war to avenge my comrades who were killed by the heavenly Tao. They're dead. You can ask sorcerer ancestor Shimang to resurrect them. There's no need for revenge," said Dickyong in a hurry. Su Ping shook his head and replied, "Escaping is not the life I want." "But you'll be with me forever," said Dickyong in a hurry. Su Ping glanced at her and saw how she was nervous, timid, and yet determined. He fell silent again. Perhaps it was indeed a good choice. However, if he knew there was such a choice and he didn't try his best, the odds of winning would only be lower. Also, as he felt the aura that stood by his side quietly, Su Ping curled his lips and shook his head with a slight motion. "That's not what I want." Dickyong's eyes became dim after his refusal. She quietly said to herself, "But that's what I want." Su Ping saw her off, then started to train with the little skeleton. The little one was only an ascendant when it died. Su Ping focused on bringing his pet's combat ability up to speed. Chapter 1543, March 1. Time moved on. More and more species arrived to the Ti-Chuo continent from various places of chaos. Some were refugees whose universes were destroyed, and some were taken there by Yin Kuei. The number of forces gathered was multiplied by several fold in the blink of an eye. In the passing of the few thousand years prior, their number surpassed the statistics from past eras. There were no counters nor rooms in the enormous, pebble-shaped store. It was empty, but it seemed to contain an infinite space, which would be enough to swallow an entire universe. "Are you ready?" said the Mother of Chaos as she quietly watched Su Ping come out from his cultivation site's outings. 10,000 years had passed. Su Ping was emitting a mature yet discreet aura at the moment. His appearance was the same, but his eyes were deep and bright, as if able to see through everything. "I've already hit the bottleneck," he said. Exactly as planned, he had condensed the 3,000 great Taos and turned them into undying universes. His combat ability had reached the maximum. Furthermore, he received the Golden Crow ancestors' blood and awakened the Golden Crow bloodline, which allowed him to grasp the ever-burning flame of their clan. The undying universe based on that flame was as powerful as the universe of original chaos. The power of those two universes alone was enough for him to dominate the undying state. The system asked sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo and Chi Mang for their blood, hoping to further strengthen the human host. However, both refused. Neither she nor Su Ping insisted. The Mother of Chaos said, "If there's enough time, you can also condense the lesser Taos into undying universes. However, the improvement is limited and the time it takes would be too long. It's time to go." Su Ping was the leader she had picked and was more than satisfied with his current status. His growth was beyond her expectations, which was a pleasant surprise. Su Ping nodded with a slight motion. He still had some room for improvement, but it wouldn't be significant. His personal strength wasn't decisive, as the war spanned all across history. He had to rely on everybody's strength and the four sorcerer ancestors' support in order to win. The Mother of Chaos turned around. The store was slowly opened, then turned into a gentle light that fused into her body. That place became an empty ground. Stunned, Su Ping said, "The store. It's part of my body. I'm now taking it back," said the Mother of Chaos. He nodded, then looked around. He felt somewhat sad. The ever-present store, always keeping him company, had just disappeared. Was it a sign? Suddenly, a crisp voice sounded, "Brother." Slightly dazed, Su Ping turned around and noticed the approaching group of familiar people. The one who called out to him was none other than his proud sister, Su Lingyu. He was surprised to hear her call him brother in public. Next to her were his parents and other familiar faces from the Blue Planet, including Zhang Lingtong, the student he had recruited back then. The Qin family was there, including their patriarch Qin Duhuang. The earliest legendary warriors on the Blue Planet were there, including Zhu Yunjin and Yi Wuxiu. The Zhou family was there, whose houses were razed to the ground by him. The Tang family also made an appearance. A few people were standing in front of the Tang family forces. One of them looked very similar to Tang Ruyan, except that she seemed much colder and more decisive. Su Ping didn't need to ask to know she was Tang Ruyan's sister. Once the Blue Planet jumped closer to the Federation region of influence, the Tang family asked Tang Ruyan to be their leader. However, she was in Su Ping's store and had no time for that. The latter learned later that she had entrusted all family affairs to her sister. The two sisters had become enemies at one point in time, but they returned to being sisters again in the end. Su Ping didn't ask what happened, but he felt happy for Tang Ruyan. After all, it was always a difficult test to part from one's family. In addition, he saw some people he had met on the Blue Planet. Some were the top students found there, while others were legendary-level warriors who had fought by his side during the Deep Caves invasion. They were all Star Lords now. Boss Su. Qin Duhuang, the old patriarch of the Qin family, looked at Su Ping in fright. The things that transpired back on their planet was but a distant memory to all of them. However, they entered that universe along with Su Ping and witnessed his growth. They could only admire him whenever they thought of him. "What are you doing here?" Su Ping rolled his eyes and said to Su Lingyu, "There's no need to take part in the war. You're too weak. You can simply stay here and wait for me to return." Su Lingyu stuck out her tongue. "Can you not be so blunt? Now that you've guessed it, we'll be blunt as well. We've all heard a lot about the upcoming war." She stared at Su Ping and added, "Brother, I didn't have a chance to fight by your side in the past, but this time we will surely fight together." "That's right, son," Su Yuanchen said with a comforting smile on his face. "If you fail, we'll die sooner or later. Being the case, we should stay together as a family." "That's right, I've discussed it with your father. Do not stop us," said his mother. "Boss Su, we're also going to participate in the war," said Qin Duhuang, Yi Wuxiu, and the others. They all gave Su Ping determined looks. The latter's expression changed a bit, then he looked at them thoughtfully. He didn't try stopping them anymore. He nodded and said, "In that case, you must try your best to survive." "We will survive together." Relieved, Su Lingyu put on a sunny smile. Su Ping looked at her, then beckoned. She felt somewhat puzzled, but she walked over anyway. Su Ping reached down and rubbed her head, messing up her neatly combed hair. He said, "If you're that eager to fight, let me see your performance." She didn't move to break free from Su Ping's grasp as she usually would. Instead, she lowered her head with bloodshot eyes. Su Ping's hand slid down and he hugged her. It was the first time he had embraced that sister of his, and possibly the last. The others felt troubled when they saw this, knowing it was very likely that they would die in the war. However, if they didn't fight, they would still die when their side lost. In that case, fighting was the better option. "This time I'm also going with you," said someone. Su Ping turned around and noticed Tang Ruyan, Green Lady, and the others arrive. The Cauldron Woman was also there. "She told me everything. The store is gone anyway. It doesn't make sense for the boss to be fighting in the frontlines while his employees only watch. You can't stop me." Tang Ruyan gritted her teeth. Su Ping glanced at the Mother of Chaos in them. He nodded and said, "I won't stop you. If you want to come along, just come along." Relieved, Tang Ruyan discarded her anxiety. She happily jumped closer to where Su Ping was, then said, "I'll show you the results of my cultivation in the past few days." "All right." Green Lady stood at the rear with a gentle smile on her face. She seemed to be thinking about something from a distant past. She would probably see the deity king. "Humph, you're just some ordinary lives. Why bother?" said an entity after a light snort. Then the rays in the void were consumed, and a black-robed young man stepped out with a domineering and suffocating aura. Su Ping's eyes were cold. He released an aura to cover all the people present, then looked up to see the black-robed expert. "Sorcerer Ancestor Ti Chuo, the war is drawing near. You'd better not annoy me." "Huh?" Sorcerer Ancestor Ti Chuo raised his eyebrows and glanced at Su Ping. The Mother of Chaos rose and glanced at Ti Chuo casually. "He's right." Chapter 1544, Ancestral Land of Chaos 1. "Humph." Ti Chuo slightly changed his expression and said dispassionately, "Just keep spoiling him. This is not child's play. It's time to go. Yin Kuei is already there." After that, he gave a cursory glance at everyone present and turned around, disappearing into the void. Su Ping frowned and concealed his aura. He glanced at the system and said, "We should go too." The latter nodded and said, "This time, I cannot go with you. The heavenly Tao forces are already occupying the outskirts of the ancestral land of chaos. We need to split up into 6 legions to crush them and reclaim the lost territories as soon as possible. We'll meet in the River of Fate, within the ancestral land. That's where we'll fight together against the heavenly Tao." "Okay." Su Ping glanced at her and said, "Then be careful." The system had already told him about the battle plan while he was roaming in the cultivation sites. The ancestral land of chaos was extremely vast. It was the center of the world of chaos, the place where the Mother of Chaos was born. That place had already been breached by the heavenly Tao. The Mother of Chaos's power relied on the ancestral land of chaos. The more land was recovered, the stronger she would be. Neither Su Ping nor the 4 sorcerer ancestors were the protagonists in the last war against the heavenly Tao. It would be a fight between the Mother of Chaos and the ultimate heavenly Tao. Only those 2 could partake in such a great war. The mission for all the others was to reclaim territory and restore the Mother of Chaos, power as much as possible. "You're the one who should be careful. Your legion is the one that I worry about the most. Those 4 are sorcerer ancestors and they're able to fight with their tribes. They can handle it. You may well be as strong as them, but you're not really one of them," said the system while staring at Su Ping. The legion he would lead included billions of species. It had the largest number but happened to be the weakest. Not even billions of creatures could compare to a single arm from a sorcerer ancestor. "Don't worry, I will accomplish the mission no matter what," said Su Ping solemnly. The Mother of Chaos gazed at him thoughtfully and said, "Then, I'll wait for you in the River of Fate." "Deal." "All right." As if having just made an agreement, the Mother of Chaos stared at Su Ping. Then she turned around and disappeared without looking back. Su Ping took a deep breath, and his expression grew solemn. He knew about the high risks related to that war. It would very likely be the most dangerous war he would fight in his entire life. Besides, the chance to resurrect was not available this time. This was completely different from the advantage of cultivation sites, where he could resurrect 1,000,000 times. He only had one chance, and the same applied to the billion creatures that followed him. They, too, only had one chance. "Let's go," Su Ping said. Su Lingyu, Qin Du Huang and the others took deep breaths, their hearts feeling burdened. However, their blood was somehow flowing fast, too. The upcoming war concerned all living creatures that had ever lived. It was more significant than any war that had ever happened. It was extremely meaningful just to be a grain of dust on the battlefield. Some people flew over and stopped in front of Su Ping. They were the human dominators, including his master. He looked at Su Lingyu, his parents, and many familiar faces he knew from the Blue Planet. Su Ping said, "Master, they're all yours." "I'll ensure their safety," said Shen Huang solemnly. "No, we're going to the battlefield," said Su Lingyu in a hurry. Slightly dazed, Shen Huang looked at Su Ping for confirmation. The latter nodded and said, "They're yours to command. They are my family and friends, but they are also warriors for this battle." Shen Huang narrowed his eyes. Nobody would say anything, even if Su Ping kept all those people in the rear, given his authority. However, he was willing to let them fight the war. This would very likely be lethal for them. His heart was rather heavy. Did Su Ping's choice imply that the odds of winning were questionable? In any case, he knew there was no turning back. He was also prepared to die. "I'll make arrangements for them to enter the battlefield," Shen Huang said to Su Ping. The latter nodded, not looking back. He took a step, growing 10 meters taller instantly. After taking a second step, he grew an extra dozen meters taller. He had already become a magnificent mythical creature after dozens of steps, one that was hundreds of thousands of meters tall, reaching to the sky. Su Ping's senses covered the entire Ti-Chuo continent, even though it was extremely vast. He could see and hear everything that the billions of species present were doing, including their conversations and cultivations. Su Ping slowly opened his mouth. "Everyone, listen to my orders." His voice rumbled in the sky, covering the entire Ti-Chuo continent and in the souls of countless living creatures. The pressure generated left all those beings in awe. Even though he had grown to such a height, he was still unable to see the edge of the continent. He manifested a projection of his face with his immense power, which spanned the entire landmass floating in the dark void, illuminating like the sun. His infinite power made all their souls quake. "I am Su Ping, the Tao ancestor of humankind. I am also your commander in the war against the heavenly Tao. All of you get ready and march with me. We will conquer the chaos and eliminate the heavenly Tao." Su Ping's loud voice echoed throughout the continent, reaching the ears of billions of species. All those creatures were shocked at the sight of the enormous face looking down at them. It was glowing. They didn't dare look away. There was a soul-stirring power in their eyes that they couldn't resist. "He's already reached such a level. Is he a sorcerer ancestor?" Among the cyborg species, Elaine and the others with undying state cultivation looked up in shock at the face in the void. They still remembered how Su Ping intimidated them with one finger earlier on. They didn't expect him to become even more terrifying. Such pressure frightened them, even considering their high level. It was as if Su Ping could easily obliterate them, regardless if they were considered to be immortal. Did someone actually break the iron law that nobody could become as strong as the 12 sorcerer ancestors? Apart from the cyborgs, the other undying state experts from the different species floated in midair and looked at the majestic figure in fear. The human Tao ancestor was beyond their imagination. They had been informed that they would be under the command of a human creature in the war against the heavenly Tao. That decision made them feel unconvinced before, wondering why a human would be qualified to lead them. But then they understood why. That Tao ancestor was not a mythical creature from chaos, but he had already exceeded most of them. He was only second to the sorcerer ancestors. Looks like he can suppress those arrogant guys. There's no need for us to worry. He knows what he's doing. In the void, sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo was indifferently looking as things unfolded on his continent. The natives of his territory were already standing behind him, leaving the billions of species under Su Ping's command on the continent. In all of history, he's the one closest to you. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a chaos qualification. The mother of chaos's eyes glittered. He will be of great help if we can loot one of the chaos qualifications from Yuan Long or the others. Sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo snorted and said, "Humph, you better not place too much hope on him. Although it's remarkable that you found this reasonably good guy as a leader in such a short amount of time, we can only rely on ourselves in the war. He and those ants are just the icing on the cake. They will be useless if we are defeated." The mother of chaos stared at the billions of species and said softly, "I created the 12 of you. You created millions of mythical creatures and they created billions of species. For me, you're all my children." "Humph, don't underestimate me," Ti Chuo snorted. Sorrow flashed in her eyes as she kept her peace. She simply created a channel. "You can go. I will guide his way for the last time. We must finish this war as quickly as possible. Right now, the main forces of the heavenly Tao are gathered near the river of fate, trying to cut it apart. Their ultimate heavenly Tao is in the depths of the ancestral land. We must finish them as quickly as possible." "I know, better tell him to hurry, I'll go first," said Ti Chuo. He waved a hand. All the mythical creatures of his clan roared with surging killing intent. The next moment, he revealed his original appearance, turning into an enormous shadow that tore the void open. "The channel that Yin Kue has built for us turned out to be useful." He then stepped in, and his clansmen followed. The channel leading into the world of chaos gradually disappeared after they left. Chapter 1545, Boarding 1. After sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo and his forces disappeared, the mother of chaos turned around and looked at the scorching planet in the void. A shadow appeared next to the planet as if nodding at her. Then, the entire planet shrank and turned into a crimson light that flew into the forged channel. The mother of chaos slowly withdrew her gaze and looked at the continent. That continent would soon collapse without sorcerer ancestor Ti Chuo's power keeping it together. She was going to give Su Ping one last ride to reach the final battlefield. Whether he would live or die would be beyond her control. On the continent, "Everyone listen to my command. Board my warship and march with me," Su Ping roared. He already sensed that the auras of the two sorcerer ancestors were no longer there. The Golden Crow ancestor and Ti Chuo had very likely set off already. The 6 legions were expected to conquer the outskirts of the ancestral land of chaos as fast as possible. Su Ping couldn't waste any time, as leading an attack would be even more difficult if the heavenly Tao was alerted. Speed was important in war. Su Ping roared, and brilliant universes appeared behind him, one after another. They were like suns rising above mountaintops. Their pressure was so immense it could be felt from billions of kilometers away. Then, those universes quickly transformed into enormous warships floating in the world. The vessels were immense, able to carry an endless amount of creatures. They floated above the billions of species at the edge of the Ti Chuo continent. Each warship emanated a terrifying pressure, which shocked and frightened all species. "Is this the power of our commander?" The still unconvinced experts finally ate their pride and gave in. They were having conflicting feelings. They could tell that those universe warships had been made by Su Ping and carried the same aura. It was obvious that the human expert was already as strong as a sorcerer ancestor, able to condense many universes with a thought. A deafening sound echoed. "Everyone board the warships." All the clans had been trained and were aware of the significance of that war. At Su Ping's command, all the experts soared to the high sky and roared. All aboard the warships! All aboard the warships! Billions of loud voices echoed. All the clans lined up in formations and boarded the warships like ants and locusts. There was an infinite space on each warship, able to accommodate the living creatures in an entire universe. The 3,000 warships could easily pack all the clans residing on the entire Chuo continent. Let's board the warships and get ready for war. All the human dominators were standing solemnly on the human clan's territory as they summoned all their forces. The weak and the slow were simply teleported to where they were supposed to be. They were instantly lined up. After boarding the warships, they chose one of the exits and flew out. Billions of creatures soared to the sky. It was the most splendid scene ever. Each species had billions of members, and the Chuo continent was unimaginably vast. It was more than 10,000 light-years long. Boom! Those gargantuan warships were interconnected by chains as thick as planets, which caused the void to shake whenever they moved. Every chain was made of a powerful great Tao. Just the momentum of the chains as they moved was enough to make the Tao heart cultivators of each clan tremble. They felt as if they were looking up at godly existences. Only empty buildings and traces of life remained on the vast continent after the billions of species boarded the warships. No living being remained. It looked rather desolate. Su Ping's enormous projection looked down at the entire Chuo continent, becoming more solemn at the abandoned place. He knew he had to win the war, or everything would be obliterated, including the billions of species he had seen. Set sail, Su Ping bellowed. Sails were instantly hoisted to resist the Tao power corrosion in the void. Each warship carried dozens of undying state members who were acting as their guards. They were the top forces of every vessel. Su Ping moved the group and left the continent as he moved toward the void. He saw the Mother of Chaos who was waiting for him. The two of them exchanged glances. There was no need to talk. They already knew what the other was thinking. Words were no longer important at the moment. Encouragement unnecessary. Reminders, everything that should be said had already been said. After noticing her solemn expression, he suddenly flashed a smile and said, "No need to worry too much. We will definitely win this war." Her lips moved, but she only nodded in the end. She knew that Su Ping was expressing his determination. Let's march. Su Ping turned around and waved an arm. 3,000 blue-black warships flew over, each of them hundreds of times the size of the sun and massive chains connecting them. They rushed into the void while radiating terrifying auras. Su Ping moved towards the channel in the void. The Mother of Chaos looked at Su Ping's back and said softly, "Stay alive." Her eyes glittered after saying that, as if surprised. Those two words had a completely different meaning. At that moment, she was prioritizing Su Ping's survival over winning the war. Su Ping paused but didn't look back. He simply a fist and waved it before he entered the channel. Boom! The 3,000 warships crossed the void and sailed to enter the channel and follow their human commander. Billions of species were being carried by the warships. Both males and females of each clan were armed and ready. The overall mood was solemn and grave. Some of the women and children looked nervous, but they were armed with marvelous blades forged and given away by the higher-ups. All the resources of every clan had been exhausted for the war. All the rare materials were used to forge weapons and armor. All the spiritual herbs were used to make pills and different types of medicine. If they lost the war, they would lose everything. The channel in the void was like the mouth of a whale, slowly swallowing the 3,000 warships. Inside was an accelerated path that allowed them to directly arrive at the ancestral land of chaos. Su Ping looked solemn as he stood in front of the 3,000 warships. Hands behind his back, he stared at the end of the channel. 10,000 years seemed to have passed, but it also felt like a short moment. There was light at the end of the pathway, followed by an abundant aura of chaos. The solemnity in Su Ping's eyes was soon replaced by ruthlessness. He was the first to step out. Before him was a vast and boundless world. It seemed like a mix of soil and fog, with countless strange planets. There were mountains akin to black clouds and bottomless gray lakes swirling like smoke. Unknown living creatures could be vaguely seen. This is the ancestral land of chaos. Su Ping sensed the abundant aura embracing him. Anybody could become a chaos creature if they cultivated in such an environment. However, the chaos aura was so abundant that the weaker ones would be corrupted and lose their bodies and souls. All their essence would be transformed into the aura of chaos. In simpler terms, they would be absorbed. Su Ping glanced around and his heart grew heavy, as there were incomplete bodies floating in the void. Some of those corpses were as big as half a planet, others were like mountains, while some had only left their skulls behind. There were huge skeletons, cracked arms, chopped claws, and some bodies had wings riddled with holes. The place was like hell. The previous owners of those bodies had been very strong creatures, the weakest having a Tao heart cultivation, which prevented their remains from decaying. Boom! The chains shook, and the 3,000 warships were pulled out of the channel. The billions of clans inside the warships witnessed the gruesome primordial scene. There was nothing but death and bones. Is this the ancestral land of chaos where countless mythical creatures were born? Time was the weakest power of all in such a place. It had been corrupted by the heavy aura of chaos and couldn't be reversed. However, judging from the scene, it wasn't hard to infer the brutal battles that took place. Su Ping stepped forward with a solemn demeanor, followed by the 3,000 warships. The chains shook as they moved. Surprisingly, the floating bodies automatically moved away when Su Ping passed by them, as if making way for him. Some bodies sank as the 3,000 warships passed, and some bodies seemed to adhere to the bottom of the ships, moving along with them. Chapter 1546, Original Dragon's Ancestor 1. Su Ping took a deep breath. They were already dead, yet he could still feel their immense willpower after millions of years. Slay the heavens. At the end of the day, their determination didn't fail them. It carried on. Su Ping stepped forward, eyes as sharp as blades. He could feel a cold and deep aura in the furthest distance of his perception, like a swirling black hole that twisted and swallowed his senses. It was the familiar feeling produced by the heavenly Tao. Set up the first formation, unjustified heavenly Tao charge, Su Ping said in a low voice. The 3,000 warships shook, each of them a universe in its own right. Commanded by Su Ping, they were shaped into a sharp arrow with Su Ping at the front. The billions of species inside the warships, led by the experts of their respective clans, set up the formation. Their fighting will was unstoppable. Once the magnificent ancient array was unfolded, Su Ping finally leashed out, transforming into an arrow and dashed forward. The 3,000 warships followed. It had to be said that sorcerer ancestor Yin Kuei had left the perfect position for Su Ping, right next to the edge of the heavenly Tao defense. This could allow Su Ping's power as well as that of all his subordinates to reach the peak. Su Ping noticed that the vague auras of the heavenly Tao forces were also gathering. The enemy had discovered him right when he charged toward them. The war had already begun. Billions of kilometers had been crossed instantly. The chaos aura and the ancient Tao power was intense in the ancestral land of chaos. Even normal ascendants were hardly able to fly. Celestials were like ordinary people with a tiny bit of power. Only the Tao heart experts and above could travel freely. Su Ping's 3,000 warships sheltered the weak, preventing them from being pressured by the prevailing environment. This also helped them unleash their power. Boom! In the blink of an eye, Su Ping saw the heavenly Tao beings. Those dark figures were like a majestic wall blocking his path. It was insurmountable and breathtaking, looking down upon all the other lives, making them feel insignificant. However, the next moment, a long spear ripped the wind apart and pierced one of the heavenly Tao creatures. The being was set ablaze and was instantly burnt. Su Ping's body was hundreds of thousands of feet tall and was just as wild and domineering as the heavenly Tao. He waved a hand and summoned his long spear to make a sweeping motion. There was a loud bang. All the heavenly Tao creatures before him were cut apart like withered grass. The great Tao power had fully annihilated them before they could react. Su Ping was at the moment able to easily kill undying state experts, let alone Tao heart fighters. However, after the heavenly Tao beings were killed, the light of chaos appeared and more heavenly Tao minions gathered in the void, seemingly coming from some sort of teleportation channel. They appeared out of thin air, giving Su Ping cold and expressionless gazes, utterly ignoring his shocking killing intent. Su Ping discovered that all the heavenly Tao forces were gathering where he was, their numbers endless to a suffocating degree as he pushed the reach of his perception. Die, Su Ping roared furiously, not giving those creatures an opportunity to delay. He wielded the spear and jumped towards the heavenly Tao ranks to make sweeping attacks. None of them was able to resist. Behind him were the 3,000 warships. They attacked the heavenly Tao forces and instantly caused openings, crushing tens of thousands of humanoids to pieces. The bodies stuck to the bottom of the warships broke free and kept fighting the heavenly Tao in their incomplete state. Some bodies mauled enemies crazily, like deranged monsters. Some of the corpses were already destroyed halfway, but they waved their remaining limbs and fought. Further into the distance, within Su Ping's range of perception, the seemingly identical forces of the heavenly Tao surged like a torrent. There were too many of them, filling his view. Killing intent surged in Su Ping's eyes. The long spear turned into a sword, and his strength quickly soared. An intense sword aura turned dozens of kilometers long, slashing dozens of heavenly Tao beings. He discovered that those creatures' actions were coordinated. Furthermore, even if they only had a Tao heart level, the damage from the Tao attacks was greatly weakened. The heavenly Tao seemed to be highly resistant to the power of Tao found in nature. They would usually have the advantage if both sides were in the undying state. Bang, bang, bang. All of a sudden, 100 golden lights of chaos fell toward Su Ping like whips. He blocked the light with his gigantic arm, which was left with hundreds of cracks. His body had been hurt. It is important to recall that he had already attained the primitive Chaos Clan body, which was even enhanced by the Golden Crow bloodline that had also been cultivated to the extreme. His body had been perfected after gathering the bloodlines of both clans. He was no longer able to absorb more bloodlines, even if he wanted to. Normal undying state experts were incapable of hurting him. Whoosh whoosh. Su Ping looked up and saw heavenly Tao fighters descend. They seemed to be slightly different, but they all gave him cold and angry stares. "We're fighting for our great cause. How dare you disrupt us?" roared one of the heavenly Tao fighters, its voice echoing throughout the battlefield. It released an immense aura of chaos and transformed into a creature as huge as a planet, looking down at the battlefield with eyes like the sun. "Listen to our judgment and don't reincarnate anymore." A brilliant light was emanated by its body. 100 heavenly Tao beings around it released chaos aura to connect to the transformed ally. Instantly, all those humanoids extended their arms and the wheels of judgment appeared. The next moment, those artifacts swirled and gathered into an enormous wheel, even bigger than the warships condensed by Su Ping. That wheel of judgment was big enough to swallow a warship. The object emitted a scorching light as it moved towards our hero. Su Ping stood on the battlefield like an unparalleled mythical creature, eyes arrogant and cold. The sword in his hand was glittering. As the enormous wheel of judgment fell, he suddenly roared and the sword turned billions of kilometers long, piercing through the entire battlefield. Boom! The sword slashed down and the enormous wheel of judgment was instantly shattered, resulting in 100 heavenly Tao beings shivering. Some were even sent flying, suffering from heavy wounds. Su Ping's sword made a sweeping motion, instantly drawing a circle on the battlefield and clearing the area within. The 100 undying state-level heavenly Tao humanoids were cut apart by the sword aura, Whatever Tao power remained was the only thing keeping them alive. He stepped forward and simply crushed their bodies, not even bothering to look back. The heavenly Tao forces were still flooding over, soon filling the circle that Su Ping had just cleared. He continued to fight with a gloomy demeanor. The number of heavenly Tao fighters was beyond his imagination, and that was only a place in the periphery. Su Ping didn't know how long he had been fighting, but he saw no decline in the number of his enemies. That long battle was like a dream. Roared. Exactly at that moment, a deafening roar sounded at the end of the horizon. The roar swept through millions of kilometers, even making Su Ping's soul shiver. The 3,000 warships around him also shook. Su Ping narrowed his eyes and looked into the distance. There an unimaginably massive shadow was rising, its eyes alone being already as huge as the sun. Then there was the enormous and scary dragon head, and a torso as huge as a galaxy. Su Ping was dazed. That was sorcerer ancestor Yuan Long. He immediately remembered what the system had told him. Yuan Long had been suppressed by the heavenly Tao in the previous war. Indeed, you're the ant that appeared in my memories. I already knew when my mother trained you in the illusions, and I knew that this war would soon begin, just as I expected. Yuan Long saw Su Ping at the center of the battlefield. There was coldness in its enormous eyes. You knew Su Ping's eyes were cold. Yuan Long sneered. That's right. My level is beyond your imagination, and I'm even stronger than before. As long as I appear in your illusion and see you, I will know. My name must not be spoken. My eyes see through everything. Its body coiled, occupying half of the enormous battlefield. It stretched forward and crossed millions of kilometers as it moved closer to where Su Ping was. The enormous dragon head looked down at Su Ping like a deity in the sky, looking down at mere mortals on the ground. Chapter 1547, Die Without Regret 1. So what if you know, said Su Ping as he stared back. I heard you were subdued by the heavenly Tao. Are you here to stop me? Are you willing to be at the mercy of someone else despite being a sorcerer ancestor? Hilarious. Yuan Long sneered. We are unrestrained. I'm merely cooperating with the heavenly Tao. How can we be affected by the reestablishment of chaos? You are inconsequential ants and dust. A new world will begin once the debris is dealt with. New ants will replace old ants, but we are eternal. Bullshit eternity. Su Ping was so infuriated that he laughed and said, getting to the bottom of it, you're just afraid of death. Would you be as obedient if the heavenly Tao hadn't suppressed you? You're just deluding yourself. Are you really the oldest dragon? Have you only taught dragons to be domineering in front of others? You're just tame dogs in front of the heavenly Tao. Yuan Long became gloomy as he said, just as sharp-tongued as I remember. However, it's pointless no matter what you say, everything is fated to happen. You're naive if you think you can clear this level. You will fail again this time. She won't have another opportunity to attack. Then you can go to hell, Su Ping roared. The fury in his heart was like flames in the underworld. It was a sorcerer ancestor raised by the system. The guy was a deserter, which infuriated him even more than the heavenly Tao did. Unfortunately, you're just an ant in my eyes without the chaos qualification, said Yuan Long indifferently. A stream of a twisted fiery power darted out from his gargantuan star-like eyes. The void became scorching hot, and all the great Taos began to melt. Su Ping felt the chaos aura around his body start to ebb. It was no ordinary fire, but an extreme power able to destroy all the great Taos. Come on, Su Ping roared furiously and unleashed all his power, gathering a brilliant sword aura and slashing it forth. Boom, the sword aura exploded. Su Ping was struck and sent flying. There was a huge hole on his chest, and the surrounding was unable to regenerate. The burning fire would not die out. I said that you're an ant. Do you disagree? Yuan Long looked down at Su Ping with dazzling light in his eyes again. Another pair of power streams darted out. The power of hundreds of overlapping universes instantly surged, at the behest of the guy's single thought. Su Ping narrowed his eyes and quickly dodged. The ground underneath his feet fell apart, leaving two bottomless holes the moment he jumped away. He looked up and saw Yuan Long, who was like a cat toying with a mouse. There was no mention in the briefing that one of the 12 sorcerer ancestors would stand in his way. The strength gap was insurmountable. Was he going to fail? His failure would surely affect the system and the other 4 sorcerer ancestors. It might be the decisive factor for the final outcome. While Su Ping was thinking quickly, roars burst out from the rear. Ancestor. Su Ping turned back and looked, only to see figures rising from the shields on the 3,000 warships. They were emitting a powerful light, seemingly as unstoppable as planets. Dao Ancestor, there's no need to protect us. Just dispel the warships. Please block Yuan Long, Dao Ancestor. We will reinforce you the moment we finish off the heavenly Dao creatures. No need to worry about us, Dao Ancestor. Scorching thoughts were being relayed. Su Ping could sense their determination and felt that his blood was flowing backwards. However, with everything coming to that point, he had to go all out so he could face Yuan Long. He had gathered billions of species exactly because he couldn't win the war on his own. He needed the help of all the others. What can we do if the protection is cancelled? You can't remove the shields. All of us will die. A sorcerer ancestor is in our way. Let's run. We can't possibly win. I can't let my mother die here. The wails of some people were mixed with the staunch voices of those willing to fight inside 3,000 warships. They knew they'd be no match for the heavenly Dao forces at all if the shields were removed. Furthermore, just being exposed to the chaotic environment was extremely dangerous. One had to remember that not only warriors had gone to war, there were also the elderly and the young. Even the disabled and the heavily wounded were there. That was the ultimate war that would determine their fates, so none of them held back. However, many of them were having breakdowns once they reached the battlefield. Death was right before their very eyes. They had been aware of the importance of winning during the 10,000-year cultivation period, or all species would die. However, death was right at their doorstep. Many were cowering, hoping to live a while longer. The number of beings who shared the sentiment was not small, crying out even before the warships disappeared. Shut up, you idiots! How can you flinch from this life-and-death battle? If you learn the truth in the morning, you can die happily at dawn. We're not fighting for ourselves, but for the future. I'll be the first to make a move and kill if any of you keeps crying. There was a mess inside the 3,000 warships. Those determined to sacrifice themselves glared at the ones wailing, feeling indignant and scornful. Su Ping saw all this. He felt troubled when he looked at those who were holding their heads and crying. He wasn't angry, though. He only felt sorry for them. Guys, I understand that you're unwilling to confront death. I am just as unwilling. Who would rather die if they had a chance to live? Su Ping's thoughts were directly conveyed to all the people on the 3,000 warships, regardless of their species. Their languages and cultures were different. However, Su Ping's thoughts were automatically translated in the way they could understand as he sent them telepathically. Look at the corpses we've brought on our way here. They're still fighting. They are the remnants from the last war. They've been floating here for years, waiting for us. If we fail, our lingering determination will also turn into remains that will also float in this place. We would then wait for the next army and follow them to continue our fight. This war is inevitable. If we choose to retreat, we will surely die. There are bound to be casualties. However, none of us will die meaninglessly. Don't forget why we're here. Don't forget the grudges burdening our shoulders. Don't forget the hometown we had to say goodbye to. Don't forget that we're burning lives. We should fight. The people on the 3,000 warships stopped weeping upon receiving his message. They looked at the majestic figure standing in front of Yuan Long. A normal creature like him, daring to confront an ancestor of chaos. How courageous was that? He hasn't given up yet, how can we? Someone in the undying state roared frantically, fight. That's right, we'll die without regrets. Kai Wang, Su Kong and the other humans stepped out with thoughtful light in their eyes, clenching their weapons. They were only in the Tao heart state, and they would be greatly weakened without the warships. However, they were relentless. Brother. Su Lingyu stood in the crowd like any random person. Nobody paid any special attention to her. She didn't receive any special treatment for being Su Ping's blood sister. Tears made her sight hazy. She had never been prouder of her brother. She held onto her weapon and gritted her teeth, dismissing all of her tenderness as she stuffed herself deep into her armor. She was going to unleash all her strength. It would probably be insignificant, but she didn't want to feel any regret. Fight! Fight! No one knew who was the first to shout, but roars continued to burst from the 3,000 warships. Their morale was greatly boosted. Some people looked at their children. The sadness and gentleness in their eyes was gradually replaced by fighting will. Those eyes belonged to the lives at the weaker levels. Maybe their individual contribution wouldn't affect the outcome. However, when billions of them were gathered, they could give a tiny push. Su Ping took a deep breath, knowing he couldn't hesitate. He immediately dispelled the warships. Bang! The warships transformed, releasing all the passengers on board. Then, they turned into light that quickly flew over to him. The warships turned into universes that floated behind Su Ping's back like stars. Many figures appeared next to him. They were the Inferno Dragon, the Dark Dragon Hound, the Little Skeleton, and his other pets. Su Ping stared at Yuan Long and spoke softly while holding his sword. Follow me in this last battle. Chapter 1548, Bloody Battle 1. Hulu. The Inferno Dragon roared and gazed at Yuan Long with eyes like flaming torches. Being the ancestor of all dragons, Yuan Long carried a bloodline that could make any of his kin tremble. The mere pressure of his stare could make all the undying state dragons lower their heads. However, neither the Inferno Dragon nor the vast sky thunderous dragon lowered their heads. They gazed at him with fury in their eyes. They resisted the fear, with the fury coming from within their bodies. The Dark Dragon Hound slowly stepped forward. Even though it was only half a step, it was already standing in front of the whole group, given its enormous body. Never had it been more solemn and determined. Gone were the old weak selves after following Su Ping to fight for such a long time. All of them had grown up. You're just a group of ants, and yet you think you can stop me. You don't know what you're doing. Yuan Long spoke with contempt in his eyes. He was feeling discomfited because of the vast sky thunderous dragon and the Inferno Dragon's eyes. He didn't wait any longer, spouting a mouthful of flames all of a sudden. The flames, which were as dark as chaos, were enough to corrode and destroy any universe 100 times over, instantly reaching their target as if they were in Su Ping's memories. He wasn't even able to resist, as he already felt the scorching heat all over his body. His bones, flesh, and power of chaos were burnt by the flames. Su Ping widened his eyes and roared. The 3,000 universes behind him instantly gathered and exploded, transforming into an unimaginable burst of power unleashed by Su Ping's sword. There was a boom, followed by a destructive sound. The dragon flames were blocked, but Su Ping still discovered minor burn marks on his body. He wasn't able to fully drive them away. Roar! The Inferno Dragon roared and coiled its long body, with crimson scales covered in flames. It transformed into light that directly fused with Su Ping's body. They would be instantly wiped out if they were to fight Yuan Long on their own. They could only bring out their potential if they merged with Su Ping. Nearby, the Dark Dragon Hound, the Little Skeleton, and the others moved to fuse with Su Ping's body. All of a sudden, his body, which was hundreds of thousands of feet tall, grew yet again. He was like an ancient giant. The shape of his body also underwent terrifying changes. He was covered in white bones, and dragon scales grew from those bones. A dragon head and a wolf head grew from his shoulders. There was also an enormous skull closely stuck to its body. A long tail was protruding from his body, and there was white fur below his neck. His appearance was beyond frightening. He became almost as indescribably terrifying as the ancestor after the transformation. Nobody dared to look at him. Break! Su Ping roared and swung his sword again, completely extinguishing the flames that had reached him. His sword passed through all eternity and directly slashed Yuan Long's head. The trace of this sword, if not deliberately erased, would be seen even billions of years into the future. Anger flashed in Yuan Long's eyes. Su Ping was much stronger than expected. Even he was unable to erase that ant. He was incredibly strong, even without a chaos qualification. No wonder Mother picked him. No, it's all Mother's merit. She raised another terrifying figure. Unfortunately, she failed last time and she'll fail again. He let out a roar and the entire world shook, as if weeping. The next moment, Yuan Long completely revealed his body, spinning 1 billion kilometers away. He then made a sweeping move with his body, dark light flashing in his eyes. Boom! All the heavenly Tao forces nearby were pushed away, and a horrifying blast swept over towards Su Ping. The latter looked up, only to see a gargantuan tail about to slap him. He had already sensed the agony of having shattered bones, even before the attack connected. Not only had he been struck in the present, but also in his heart and his memories. He would also be hit in the future. Unavoidable. That was an ancestor's attack that could only be resisted head-on. Normal undying state fighters would be unable to block it, making death the sole outcome. Ugh! Su Ping's eyes were bloodshot. He didn't know whether or not he could block that move, but he had to. He wasn't hopping to defeat Yuan Long. His sole aim was to buy enough time for reinforcements to arrive. It was impossible for him to beat a sorcerer ancestor on his own, as the strength gap was too wide. Boom! Su Ping's muscles surged and he waved the giant sword with both arms. The 3,000 universes behind him exploded again, pushing his arms to slash furiously. The sword aura was like a toothpick compared to the dragon tail. Extremely brilliant, but it was still completely drowned. Su Ping's body smashed heavily onto the ground. The agony was such that he felt as if torn to pieces. The most terrifying fact was to find that some of his power had dispersed, and he couldn't condense it just yet. You actually survived my attack. Your body is indeed sturdy after combining the bloodlines of 2 clans. Yuan Long's eyes were cold. The compliment was genuine, but he simply whipped his tail a second time. Su Ping heard an exclamation, "Master!" There were 2 crimson lights in the eye sockets of the skull on his back, as if about to come to life. Upon sensing the little skeleton's thoughts, he hurriedly roared, "No!" He would never let the little fellow block that kind of fatal attack for him again. It would be impossible for the pet to survive. "I can block it." Su Ping raised his head and gritted his teeth. His blood was flowing backwards as his Tao heart was spread, and he instantly sensed a consciousness of the ancestral land of chaos. However, the consciousness had somehow sealed itself, as if inside a shell. He couldn't communicate with it in the slightest. This made it impossible to make use of its power. The ancestral land of chaos's consciousness sealed itself. Is it because of the heavenly Tao? Su Ping slightly changed his expression. He stopped thinking about it given the urgency, and simply detonated his 3,000 universes to dash forward. Whoosh! His body was like a phantom. He was actually able to evade the massive dragon tail, moving at the fastest speed possible. "Thank you." Su Ping felt he had survived a disaster as he could sense the power of the attack right behind him. That was the Tao Heart's secret technique grasped by the lightning rat. It could transform all his cells and strength into particles that could penetrate laws and even great Taos. Huh. Yuan Long's expression changed a bit. Su Ping's speed was beyond his expectations, as it was almost on par with his. It would have been impossible for the ancient dragon to keep up with Su Ping if it weren't for Su Ping's lack of strength. Only Yin Kue could outrun him. Su Ping turned around and looked at Yuan Long. He then glanced at the heavenly Tao forces nearby and found that they were already fighting with the people who were inside the warships. The number of their enemies was flabbergasting, and even the weakest among them had a level comparable to the Tao Heart state. There weren't any celestial-level humanoids. There were undying state humanoids commanding them. All of them acted like well-trained legions. Su Ping gloomily charged into the place, with the highest concentration of humanoids. "Don't run." Yuan Long was rather angry. The ant-like Su Ping had escaped from him again and again. His heavenly Dao allies could think that he was going easy on the human. He quickly moved towards Su Ping. He spouted another stream of flames. Su Ping dashed into the cluster of heavenly Dao forces before him, instantly noticing that a lot of them were affected by the flames, just like he was. Some of them were set ablaze and cried miserably. They quickly vaporized into ashes until there was nothing left. "Roar!" Yuan Long let out a furious roar. Su Ping noticed that half of the tens of billions of warriors fighting against the heavenly Dao were directly turned into blood mist, all in an instant. The instant death caused infinite blood to splash out. The region was dyed red and black. Su Ping's eyes were bloodshot. He gritted his teeth and charged onward without looking back. He planned to take Yuan Long away from the battlefield, to prevent more casualties. "Humph, brat, I'll finish them off before I get to you. Just keep running." Yuan Long realized Su Ping's plan and sneered. He turned around and charged at the most heated part of the battlefield. Su Ping quickly changed his expression and stopped. "Stop!" Su Ping roared. "Huh?" Yuan Long smiled coldly, suddenly turning around and abruptly whipping his tail. Su Ping tried to move away using the lightning rat's secret technique, but there was no time. He narrowed his eyes and roared. The sword in his hand was gone. He clenched his fists and punched crazily. Countless fist auras pushed forth like a golden wall. The billions of golden fists somehow slowed the tail's momentum. The next moment, he quickly dashed forward and avoided the slower-moving dragon tail. "Humph!" Yuan Long's eyes were cold. He ignored the fleeing Su Ping and charged into the battlefield. He realized that the ants fighting could be used to threaten that human. "Roar!" With a roar, a beam of light darted forth and traversed the battlefield, instantly creating a massive ravine that ran through the whole battlefield. Countless species perished in a mere instant, even the ones with undying state cultivation. They didn't survive beyond half a second. Su Ping's eyes were bloodshot. He only had two choices at the moment. One was to charge toward the heavenly Dao. However, Yuan Long would definitely slaughter others faster than him as he hunted the heavenly Dao's forces. The other was to hold Yuan Long back. "You're the dragon's ancestor. Do you only know how to show your back to your enemy, bastard?" Su Ping roared and glared at the creature with ruthless eyes. Yuan Long's enormous body paused. He turned around and looked at Su Ping coldly. "Why? Are you done running?" Chapter 1549, Protracted Battle. "Come and fight me." Killing intent surged from Su Ping's eyes. He said, "You're the dragon's ancestor and carry the chaos qualification. Let's find out whether or not you deserve to be called the strongest dragon in all of existence." "As you wish." Yuan Long instantly turned around and charged, simply unleashing an overpowering aura. His enormous claws tore the void open and instantly reached the spot where Su Ping was. The latter didn't dodge. He instantly drew his sword. All his blood was burning. The illusion of the golden crow was vaguely manifesting in his back. He sacrificed his golden crow bloodline for more power. 3,000 universes slash. The thousands of universes behind Su Ping's back exploded instantly, transforming into a terrifying power that was unleashed by his sword. After a massive bang, Yuan Long's sharp claws, enhanced by the power of hundreds of universes, managed to block Su Ping's attack. The edge of the sword produced dazzling sparks as it made contact with the scales. Infuriated, Yuan Long roared. His aura turned into a concrete golden blast that pressed down on his enemy. Su Ping's hair was dangling under the pressure. All his muscles were trembling. He found it hard to endure the pressure, as if bearing the weight of millions of planets. However, his 3,000 universes recovered in a moment. He detonated them again, letting the violent power surge to slash furiously once again. The golden dragon aura was torn apart after the opening was made, which was like the puncture of a sharp needle in a golden ocean. Bang! A stream of power surged from within and struck back, sending Su Ping flying. The latter jumped. Dozens of universes exploded in his palm, then he swung a fist. The fist tore the dragon aura to pieces and struck Yuan Long in the head. Roared! Yuan Long burst into fury. Su Ping was just an ant in his eyes. However, the lad would somehow survive again and again. The massive beast rotated, and golden light was suddenly gathered in the void which then turned into undying state-level original dragons. There were at least 10,000 of them. Su Ping slightly changed his expression. They weren't real original dragons, but mere condensations produced with his universes. Dragon enchantment, Yuan Long roared. The 10,000 undying state dragons also roared. Their bellowing was condensed into an ancient array, but that was more of an aggressive force field than an array. Normal lives would be obliterated once entering, even if they were in the undying state. Su Ping could sense that his flesh was being torn apart. Even the power of contract in his body was falling apart. He gritted his teeth with bloodshot eyes, then detonated the 3,000 universes and charged in one direction. Whoosh! He instantly approached the edge like a golden crow, instantly cutting apart dozens of undying state original dragons as he slashed on furiously, creating an opening on the array for him to escape. Hardly had he escaped the lethal array when a sharp claw descended from the sky and pressed Su Ping heavily, pushing him away. He felt as if hit by a rushing universe and found it impossible to control himself. Many things on his path broke, and then he was swallowed by excruciating pain. Su Ping turned around, then saw Yuan Long's sharp claw pushing him all the way to the depths of the ancestral land of chaos. He wanted to resist it and stabilize himself. However, his opponent had infinite strength and he couldn't stop himself. It felt like being pushed a light year away. He only stopped until something fiercely struck his chest, which made him vomit a mouthful of blood. He felt that something tough was on his chest. He instantly noticed that it was an extremely thick and solid plate, made of rock, except it was unbelievably hard. Phew! Yuan Long's sharp claw kept on suppressing him. Then the great dragon spurted a mouthful of flames all of a sudden. Su Ping was incapable of breaking free, as the claws contained infinite Tao power that restrained all his transformation methods. If not for this, he would have turned into particles to gather once again later. There were a lot of flame-based great Taos: rotting, burning, imprisonment, sealing, destruction, and so on. The traits of thousands of overlapping great Taos were able to destroy any undying state expert. Even their souls would be gone. They would be completely annihilated from time and from memory. However, golden ripples appeared and surrounded Su Ping. Those ripples kept spreading. They somehow blocked the flames. Those ripples were in fact the power of exploding universes. Su Ping was detonating the 3,000 universes, one by one. Each second, dozens of universes were exploding and regenerating in cycles. The result was their power to flow non-stop like ripples, blocking the dragon flames. The dragon flames contained too many great Taos. They seemed to be sweeping as a whole, but they actually consisted of many frequencies. In simpler terms, it wasn't a simple, fierce attack, but one of a continuous nature. The ripples made by Su Ping's exploding universes happened to suppress the ongoing attacks. He seemed to be affected by the flames, but the golden ripples protected him like water. He wasn't hurt in the slightest. Asshole! Yuan Long was infuriated. He was almost using his full strength, and Su Ping was still alive. Su Ping's eyes were cold. Although suppressed by the claws and incapable of breaking free, he hoped that this would continue, all to buy himself more time. However, he wasn't sure if the other species would be able to take care of the heavenly Tao forces without his command. Su Ping's heart was heavy, but the only thing he could do was hold Yuan Long back. It was impossible for him to kill it as he was. The dark dragon hound's voice sounded in Su Ping's head. "Boss, if the guy is condensing thousands of great Taos to attack simultaneously, I have another method." That golden ripple defensive technique was developed by the former. The pet had been informed of the war in advance, so the fellow designed the technique based on Su Ping's condition, spending thousands of years perfecting it. Okay, Su Ping responded in his heart. Yuan Long stopped his flame attacks at the moment, then suddenly opened its mouth to manifest a vortex that looked like a black hole, which darted towards Su Ping. The latter's expression changed, as he could feel the infinite destructive power of that move. The golden ripples covering his body instantly turned into a golden cloak. The garment was as soft as the fabric of a dress, seemingly gentle and soft, but using the power of 3,000 universes. The cloak floated to meet the enormous black vortex. The latter was like a basketball scoring, except it was caught in the net. The cloak didn't rip open, it wrapped and blocked the black vortex. However, the terrifying momentum of the black vortex struck Su Ping in the back, along with the golden cloak. He felt that his spine was broken, as if a planet made of lead had smashed into him. Such momentum could have killed lots of people in the undying state. Su Ping gritted his teeth after his back blocked the vortex's momentum, then summoned his strength, transforming the golden cloak into a giant hand that grabbed the black phenomenon and threw it back at Yuan Long. Yuan Long slightly changed his expression, as he was shocked and infuriated. Su Ping's defense was too powerful. Those two attacks should have been enough to kill him, yet he survived both of them. Whoosh! He moved his head a bit to dodge the black vortex. He kept pressing Su Ping down while saying, "Did Mother teach you all this?" "Did your mother teach you all this?" Su Ping sneered and said, "Oh, a bastard like you probably doesn't have a mother. Not even animals would betray their mothers. You're asking to be killed." Exasperated, Yuan Long suddenly clenched Su Ping and picked him up from the particularly hard rock. He rose higher and said, "I will rip you apart in front of those ants and show them your humble face." Su Ping's expression changed, quickly turning around to slash with his sword. However, his sharp weapon only left shallow marks on the scales, unable to cut them apart. Chapter 1550, Reinforcement of Billions of Species 1. Whoosh! Yuan Long soared and carried Su Ping to the sky above the battlefield. It then roared, spreading his voice billions of kilometers into the distance. All the creatures on the battlefield could hear the loud bellowing. The billions of species were utterly frightened, as if a demon were whispering directly into their ears. The overwhelming pressure made them want to kneel. "Look, that's the human Tao ancestor." "How is it possible?" "The Tao ancestor can't beat the original dragon's ancestor anyway. That's a sorcerer ancestor." The undying state experts saw how Su Ping was ensnared by the dragon claw. They all looked awful and desperate. Su Ping was already strong enough. He had condensed 3,000 universes into 3,000 warships and was definitely the strongest, except for the sorcerer ancestors. However, was he still too weak compared to those existences begotten by chaos? Not even the Tao ancestor can persist for much longer. Are we going to lose? "Father, Mother." Someone lost their composure and cried. That roar had shattered countless lives. Millions of families were instantly destroyed. There were oceans of blood all over that vast world. "Brother." In the crowd, Su Lingyu saw the gargantuan figure and Su Ping in the sky, her face immediately turning pale. The next moment, she moved in a frenzy as she left the crowd and flew with the Moonfrost Dragon, the one his brother had trained, swiftly heading towards him. Shen Huang noticed Su Lingyu's movement and said in a hurry, "Come back, it's dangerous." Su Ping had indeed said that it was unnecessary to pay special attention to his family. Shen Huang was his master. He couldn't bear to see him making such sacrifices. "Is Boss Su losing too?" "We're screwed. A sorcerer ancestor is defending this place. It's impossible for us to win." "Bullshit. Stop being so pessimistic. Boss Su has been caught, so we'll try to rescue him. Is there another way out for us in today's battle? We'll die, either fighting or slaughtered by staying idle. I would rather die after shedding the last drop of my blood." "That's right, follow me. Let's rescue Boss Su as soon as possible." "Boss Su needs us too. He's held the sorcerer ancestor back all this time. Now it's our turn. Charge! Many human figures soared to the sky, forming giants made by military formations, and quickly flying towards Su Ping instead of fighting the heavenly Tao forces. Many undying state experts of the other clans had also realized that Su Ping was the key to victory. It would be impossible for them to stop Yuan Long if Su Ping did die in battle. Despair. There was nothing left for them to abandon. Wolf Eagles, follow me. The Sky Ocean clan is willing to die with you. Charge, there's no way back. We can only move forward. Save the human Tao ancestor, hurry up. The previously chaotic battlefield became even more turbulent. From the midst of billions of species, some military formations were formed and charged towards Su Ping, leaving the heavenly Tao beings alone. Some species covered each other neatly. Some were responsible for holding the humanoids back, while the rest moved to offer Su Ping a hand. Many figures emerged from the billions of species and moved in all directions on the vast territory. Su Ping was flying in the high sky, still caught by Yuan Long's sharp claws. He saw the whole situation at ground level. He also noticed the figures going all out, bloodied. He was stunned. His eyes were bloodshot despite his composure. He didn't know those species well. Even their names and appearances were strange to him, even though they were comrades on the same battlefield. However, billions of species were moving to help him at that moment. He also saw that some of the experts of the weaker clans were rushing over with the strongest people. The weaklings were left on the battlefield, who became a thin wall to block the heavenly Tao. They were soon destroyed by the humanoids as they were left without the command of their undying state experts. Those clans abandoned their own people, all for him. Su Ping gritted his teeth. He looked at the blossoming red petals on the ground. Each petal was an ocean of blood that stretched for millions of kilometers. The remains of billions of species were soaked in an ocean of blood. Looks like those little ones are aware of your importance. They'll be loose sand if I kill you. In that case, let's just end this folly. Yuan Long sneered, then soared to the center of the battlefield and raised Su Ping to a high spot. It was even crueler as the torrents flooded towards him in all directions. Rot in hell. The ancient dragon exerted strength with indifference. Thousands of universes exploded in his palm. Although mere illusions, those universes still released a terrifying power. That power was released by the chaos qualification. It was fairly easy for Yuan Long. But the next moment, Su Ping didn't burst to pieces while caught in the claw. He remained intact. White bones were emanating dazzling light on Su Ping's body, like crystals. A brilliant, ancient array was etched on each bone, from which there was an emergence of strange patterns. Underneath those bones were golden ripples and slithering lightning bolts. Boss, we can do this. The dark dragon hound's roar echoed in Su Ping's ears. Red light glittered on the skull located on Su Ping's back, like bloody blades. The dark dragon hound, the little skeleton, the inferno dragon and all the other pets were achieving perfect cooperation, releasing their skills with Su Ping's strength and establishing the ultimate defense. Su Ping was overwhelmed by troubling feelings. He remained silent. He had opened his body to the little skeleton and the others, and could also draw from his power. Such trust allowed him to perfectly fuse with his pets. All their power was gathered, blocking Yuan Long's full-strength attack. Su Ping instantly saw hope. As it turned out, he was strong enough to compete with Yuan Long, as long as he made the best use of his strength. Yuan Long widened his eyes with shock and fury. He sensed that his power was constantly diminishing. The white bones on Su Ping's body actually contained the bloodlines of the primitive Chaos clan and the Golden Crows. The power of both clans strengthened those bones, while the golden ripples worked as a buffer to reduce the impact. He actually survived the attack. You're asking to be killed. Yuan Long was rather infuriated since he was having trouble killing an ant. He roared and released scales that were like sharp daggers towards Su Ping. The latter didn't wait to get killed, suddenly releasing the bones protecting him, which instantly turned into swords that were like the spines on a hedgehog, pushing the dragon claws away. He stomped and broke out of the claw prison. Tao ancestor. Basu. Our Tao ancestor is free. The billions of species were thrilled to see this happen. Some of the reinforcements had already died on the way over. At first, there were 10,000 of them, but only a few dozens of people with Tao heart and undying state cultivation remained. They had been desperate, but they were now overjoyed since they saw that Su Ping had broken free on his own. Tao ancestor will fight by your side. We will raise our swords and fight, even if we're facing a sorcerer ancestor, said the reinforcements with loud voices. They gathered behind Su Ping's back, waiting for his orders. All of them were ready to die. It was unlikely for them to survive the war, which made him become ruthless. Everyone. Su Ping didn't turn, yet he was able to see their faces. Based on human standards, many of those beings looked bizarre. They were more like monsters and beasts. However, their auras were deeply interconnected at the moment. The resonance of their souls could be detected. Underneath those bizarre bodies were scorching and dazzling souls. Since we've already paid such an enormous price, please die with me. Su Ping's voice was particularly dry and cold.